Yeah. Word. So we just chilling, smoking up. Pain name meaning means rustic or countryman. I identify as a Pain. At work. What are we doing today? What is we doing today? Let me switch the screen up. Which one is that? Yeah, there we go. Nice.
4453 Friday 2 Glen Falls 1148.
Let's get it.
Let that shit bang, nigga.
Yeah, ay. Get it, got it, copy, yeah. Get it, got it, copy. Get it, got it, copy. Oh, you want a copy of the what? Get it, got it, copy, yeah. Get it, got it, copy, yeah. When I'm opening up my mouth, you can't not go stop me, yeah. Hey, get it, got it, copy, yeah. Get it, got it, copy. Get it. Get it, got it, copy, yeah. Get it, got it, copy, yeah. Get it. I get it, got it, copy, yeah. Get it, got it, copy, yeah. Get it, got it, copy, yeah. Copy that, copy this, yeah. They wanna copy Chris, good mix, yeah. Oh shit. Yeah. Coming right back with the hits, yeah. Just came back from a split, yeah. Just came back from a split, you know that I'm doing that shit. Get it, I got it, copy, yeah. Get it, I got it, copy. Get it, got it, copy. I get it, I got it, I copy. Yeah, fuck motherfuckers. I get it, I got it, I copy. Yeah, I get it, I got it, I copy. Get it, got it, copy. Get it, got it, copy. What the fuck, you can't wake up without the coffee, yeah. Yeah.
Let that shit bang, nigga.
Get it, I got it, I copy, yeah. Get it, I got it, I copy, yeah. Get it, I got it, I copy, yeah. copy, yeah. Get it, I got it, I copy. Old school style, like I came with a floppy disk, yeah. All of my shit, yeah. All of my shit is legit, yeah. We fighting a war over the poppy. We fighting wars over the poppy seeds, yeah. I get it, I got it, I copy, yeah. Get it, I got it, I copy, yeah. Mental and mindset minded, Bobby, yeah. Like, what the fuck, though? Yeah, I get it, I got it, I copy. Just cooling down. What are we doing here? Yeah.
That face that is usually covered by her phone.
Dude, you touch me one more time, we're gonna have a problem. I'm not him. I'm not him. I tell you that right now. I'm not him.
Give me my motherfucking microphone. Wait, that's my property. You assaulted me. That's my property.
Get out of their face.
No, you have no right.
Property.
No, you have no right. You have no right.
I can't do this. They're already bitching way too much. Yo, shit. That's horrible. Cleveland police officers suspended over text.
Today is October 26, 2017. Time now is 12:31.
I don't even like it already. I can't see his face.
Case number 170037. I'm Sergeant Todd Clark. Can we go around the room and introduce ourselves, please?
Thomas Lasco, CPPA. William Gonzalez, my badge is 2020. I'm with the CPPA also.
This
Brian
goal is
Ward,
to educate.
Aaron Pettit, badge 101.
Officer, prior to starting this interview, I showed you the Internal Affairs Administrative Interview form. Is that correct?
Yes, you did.
Explained to you the reasons you're here for this interview today?
Yes.
The rights you have during this interview?
Yes.
Possible sanctions you could be facing if you are untruthful during this interview?
Yes.
You had a chance to look at the form?
Yes.
Understand the form?
I do.
And you signed it, is that correct?
I did.
Any objections to the form?
No objections to the form.
Okay. And my understanding is that you want to place an objection on the record as far as the context of the interview?
Right. Thank you. As we did with the last interview, we have an objection to going forward with this. We understand you have a job.
Yeah,
to do.
I like.
We believe that this is unrelated to the actual initial investigation. The information that was obtained was in regards to a different complaint. Our officers have rights to privacy as well as due process, and we believe that this is, again, texting on his personal phone, not a Cleveland phone. And we believe that it was not anything that was put forth on a social media outlet. And for those reasons, we don't think that there's any administrative, there should be any reasons to go forward with an administrative hearing. Thank you.
Fair enough. Officer,
Who's that, the attorney?
current telephone number? Are you familiar with Sean Gorman, former Cleveland police officer?
Yes.
Do you know his phone number?
Yes.
What is it?
I don't know it off the top of my head. I apologize.
Okay. But is it fair to say that you've had conversations with him from your personal phone to his personal phone?
Yes.
Often? Or
No.
Or what? And if I this is the easiest way to do it.
Okay.
Sure.
I want you to read this This is a text message conversation that was taken from Gorman's cell phone and it's dated April 27th. Take a minute to read that, and then we'll talk about it. Okay?
Nah. What's he reading? Read it out loud for me, buddy.
Okay.
All right. Step back for me. Sure. Sorry. Do you remember that conversation?
Yes.
On April 27th. You do remember it? Can you walk me through what the context of the conversation is and how it came about?
I remember it just from rereading the text.
What exactly was this in reference to? Okay.
Nope, toxic video. Just couldn't get engaged. Introduction to superposition. Whoa.
The following content is provided under a Creative Commons license. Your support will help MIT OpenCourseware continue to offer high-quality educational resources for free.
Yeah, good looks.
To make a donation or to view additional materials from hundreds of MIT courses, visit MIT OpenCourseware at ocw.mit.edu.
Hi, everyone.
Oh, shit.
Welcome to 804 for spring 2013. This is the fourth and presumably final time that I will be teaching this class, so I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, probably
so my
because
name
you
is
showed
Alan
up
Adams.
just for me.
I'll be lecturing the course. I'm an
Thank you.
assistant professor in course 8. I study
8.0.
string theory
8.0.
and
Let's
its
go.
application.
That's
So
so
my name is Alan
facts.
Adams. I'll be lecturing the course. I'm an assistant professor in course 8.
Yeah, I'm course 8. Thank you,
I study
sir.
string theory and its applications
Yes.
to gravity,
Yes.
quantum gravity, and condensed matter physics.
You're my man.
Quantum mechanics.
Look at that smile. He's
This
catching
is a
it.
course in quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics is my daily language. Quantum mechanics is my old friend. I met quantum mechanics 20 years ago. I just realized that last night. It was kind of depressing.
Whoa,
so,
shit.
Old friend. It's also my most powerful tool. So I'm pretty psyched about it. Our recitation instructors are Barton Zwiebach, yay, and Matt Evans, yay. Okay, Matt's new to the department, so welcome him. Hi.
What up, Matt?
So he just started his faculty position, which is pretty awesome. And our TA is Paolo Glorioso. Paolo, are you here? Hey, there you are. Okay, so he's a person to send all complaints to.
Paolo.
So,
Poor guy.
just out of curiosity, how many of y'all are course 8?
Thank you.
Oh, awesome. How many of y'all are, 18?
What?
Solid. 6?
The fuck? What is this?
Excellent.
Where is he
8.
teaching?
Oh, awesome. How many of y'all are, 18? Solid. 6? Excellent. 9?
Wow.
No one?
I'm
Yeah,
9.
This is the first year we haven't had anyone course 9. That's a shame.
It's true.
So,
Because I'm 8.0,
last year one of the best
bitches.
students was a course 9 student.
Number 9 is the
two
God thing.
practical things to know. The first thing is everything that we put
Whoa.
out will be
Whoa,
on-
hold up. What'd he say?
No one? Damn, this is the first year we haven't had anyone course 9. That's a shame. Last year one of the best students was a course 9 student.
Wow.
So two practical things
No
to know.
shit.
The first thing is everything that we
Last year was a
put
good
out
year.
will be on the Stellar website. Lecture notes, homeworks, exams, everything is going to be done through Stellar, including your grades. The second thing is that, as you may notice, there are rather more lights than usual. I'm wearing a mic, and there are these signs up. We're going to be videotaping this course for the lectures for OCW. And if you don't want to, if you're happy with that, cool. If not, just sit on the sides and you won't appear anywhere on video. Sadly, I can't do that, but you're welcome to if you like.
Right,
But
he's a
hopefully
professor.
that
He
should
can't.
not play a meaningful role in any of the lectures. So I'm going to...
I'll play a meaningful role, bitch.
Okay. So the goal of 804 is for you to learn quantum mechanics. And by learn quantum mechanics, I don't mean learn how to do calculations, although that's an important and critical thing. I mean learn some intuition. I want you to develop some intuition for quantum phenomena. Now, quantum mechanics is not hard. It has a reputation as being a hard topic.
Complex.
It is not a super hard topic. It does, however,
Maintain a superposition.
require, so in particular, everyone in this room, I'm totally positive, can learn quantum mechanics. It does require concerted effort.
Facts.
It's not a trivial
You gotta know some shit. You gotta
And
know relations
in order
of
to really
things to
develop a good
things.
intuition, the essential thing is to solve problems. So the way you develop a new intuition is by solving problems and by dealing with new situations,
Wow.
new contexts, new regimes which is what we're going to do in 804. It's essential that you work hard on the problem set.
The science regime.
So your job is to devote yourself to the problem sets. My job is to convince you at the end of every lecture that the most interesting thing you could possibly do when you leave is the problem set.
Facts.
Okay. So you decide who has the harder job.
The philosopher.
So the workload is not so bad. We have problem sets due.
I'll do
They're
it.
due in the physics
Just
box
take
in
it
the
word
usual
for word.
places by lecture by 11 a.m. sharp on Tuesday.
It's noon.
Okay, every week. Late work, no, not so much. But we will drop one problem set to make up for unanticipated events. We'll return the graded problem sets a week later in recitation. Should be easy. I strongly encourage you to collaborate with other students on your problem sets.
Right.
You will learn more. They will learn more. It will be more efficient. Work together.
How do you know who's a
However,
student of life
write
and
up your
who's
problem
just a
set yourself.
cocky asshole?
Okay? That's the best way for you to develop and test your understanding. There will be 2 midterms, dates to be announced, and one final.
Nope.
I guess it will be a real class. And it.
All right, bro. You better start moving, man. I don't like you teaching already.
That's an excellent question. I don't know. I don't think so.
I can't watch
I
videos.
think
No,
it's gonna
bro.
happen at the end of the Yeah. Okay. So
You
no.
gotta
you'll-
keep
you'll,
skipping through,
you'll
dude.
be able to watch them later on the OCW website. Other questions?
Of
Yeah.
what?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Probably, yeah.
I
didn't.
don't off the top of my head, but if you send me an email,
I could suggest you millions of shit. One of my favorite things is heart coherence. Yeah, that stuff's pretty cool.
I'll peruse around, because I do know several other
Thank you.
lecture
You'll
series
pursue
that-
it. I appreciate it.
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't off the top of my head, but if you send me an email, I'll peruse around, because I do know several other lecture series that I liked very much, but I don't know if they're available on YouTube or publicly. So send me an email and I'll check. Yeah? Reading assignments on the problem set every week will be listed. There will be equivalent reading from every textbook. And if there is something missing, like if no textbook covers something. And now we're going to measure the color at the output.
Yeah. What?
We've already done that experiment. So what do you measure the hardness at the output? In addition to this hardness box, I'm going to introduce 2 elements. Particularly awesome experiments done by Nergis Malvavala, whose name I can never pronounce.
Malvavala.
Totally awesome. She's an amazing physicist.
Thank
she
you.
can get these kind of quantum effects out of a 20-kilo mirror. So before you say something silly like, it's just electrons, it's 20-kilo mirrors. And if I could put you on a pendulum that accurate, it would be you. Okay?
It would be me.
These are
Holy
properties.
fuck. This literally, he said in the beginning of the video, he learned it when he was 6. I learned it when I was 6, and there's 20 years of me
Before
fucking
you say something
20
silly like,
kilos.
it's just electrons, it's
20
20-kilo
kilo
mirrors.
mirrors.
And if I could
Wow.
put you on a pendulum that accurate, it would be you. Okay?
Yeah, because I'm
These are
anchored
properties
by a time
of
of life.
everything around you.
Wow, no shit.
The miracle is not that electrons behave oddly.
I'm glad
the
we
miracle is
all-
that when you take 10 to the 27 electrons, they behave like cheese.
Ooh, I'm getting cheese at
That's the
27.
miracle,
Getting
okay?
that
This is the
cheese, stacking
underlying
cheese,
correct
no
thing.
mozzarella. Get the rap
Okay,
game up.
so this is so far so good. But let's go deeper.
That's insane,
Let's push
dude.
it. And to push it, I want to design for you a slightly more elaborate apparatus.
Okay, wow.
Slightly more elaborate experimental apparatus.
Apparatus.
And for this, I want you to consider the following device.
A dev-
I'm going to need
this
to
is a
introduce a
device.
couple of new features for you. So here's a hardness box, and it has an in port. And the hardness box has a hard aperture, and it has a soft aperture. And now, in
Aperture,
addition to this hardness box, I'm going to introduce 2 elements. First, mirrors.
right.
Okay. And what these mirrors do is they take the incident electrons and nothing else, they change the direction of motion.
Facts.
Change the direction of motion. And here's what I mean by doing nothing else. If I take one of these mirrors, and I take, for example, a color box, and I take the white electrons that come out, and I bounce it off the mirror, okay, and then I send these into a color box, then they
Yeah.
come out white 100% of the time. It does not change the observable color.
Right.
All it does is change the direction. Similarly with the hardness box, it doesn't change the hardness, it just changes the direction of motion. Okay? And every experiment we've ever done on these guys changes in no way whatsoever the color or the hardness by subsequent measurement.
The color of the hardness.
Just changes the direction of motion.
Right. So it doesn't
And
even
then I'm
matter
gonna
what the
add
color of the hardness.
Another mirror. It's actually a slightly fancy set of mirrors. All they do is they join these beams together
Wow, that's me.
into a single beam.
No shit. Thank you.
And again, this doesn't change the color. You send in a white electron, you get out, and you measure the color. On the other side, you get a white electron. You send in a black electron from here, and you measure the color. You get a black electron again out. Cool?
Whatever is in is out.
So here's my apparatus. And I'm going to put this inside a big box.
A big box.
And I want to run some experiments with this apparatus.
Like what? He's a professor.
Everyone cool with the basic design? Any questions before I cruise on?
Patent it. Is it patented? Who made this?
This part's fun. Okay. So what I want to do now is I want to run
EMP.
some simple experiments before we get to fancy stuff. And the simple experiments are just going to warm you up.
Chalkboard. Look at that
They're going
shit.
to prepare you to make some predictions and some calculations. And eventually we'd like to lead back to this guy. So the first experiment,
Damn. The
I'm going to
chalkboard.
send in white electrons. Whoops. I'm going to send in white electrons.
Can electrons have color?
And I'm going to measure at the end, and in particular at the output, the hardness.
Yeah, the hardness is, do electrons have color? Tough question.
Okay? So I'm going to send in white electrons.
Here's some white electrons. Sometime I heard from
And I'm going to measure the hardness.
something
so this is
that
my
like
apparatus.
humans only
I'm
see
gonna
the
measure
sky
hardness of the
blue,
output.
but
What I mean by measure the
we
hardness
would
is
see
I
the
throw
sky
these
purple.
electrons into a hardness box and see what comes out.
It just came
so
from
this is
nowhere.
experiment
but
one.
The way we see the Earth, it gives the
let me draw this-
colors
Let me
differently.
embiggen the diagram.
She's erasing it because I,
You send white
yeah.
into. So the
dying.
mechanism is a hardness box.
Yeah, my idea died. It was a hard problem to solve, to bring up. Thank you.
And now, whoops, we're measuring the hardness out. So hardness.
Yeah, how do you get the color of an electron?
And the question I want to ask is, how many electrons come out the hard aperture, and how many electrons come out the soft aperture of this final hardness box? Okay. So I'd like to know what fraction come out hard and what fraction come out soft. I send an initial white electron. For example, I took a color box and took the white output. Send them into the hardness box.
Oh, 'cause
mirror, mirror, hard, hard, soft. And what fraction come out hard, and what fraction come out soft?
Whatever.
Okay.
So this
just think
part
about it
right
for-
here combines it. So whatever's combined, you get a portion of each.
And when you have a prediction in your head, raise your hand.
Already did. So whatever's combined, you just get a new color.
Right, good. Walk me through your prediction.
So because it's like you combine the two colors, you get a new one,
How come?
and then
Good. Awesome. So let me say that again. So we've done the experiment. You send a white electron into a hardness box, and we know that it's non-predictive, 50-50. So if you take a white electron and you send it into the hardness box, 50% of the time it will come out the hard aperture, and 50% of the time it will come out the soft aperture. Now, if you take the one that comes out the hard aperture, then you send it up here, send it up here. We know that these mirrors do nothing to the electron, to the hardness of the electron, except change the direction of motion.
yes,
We've already done that experiment. So what do you measure the hardness at the output? What do you get?
the same.
Hard, because it came out hard, mirror, mirror, hardness, hard.
Oh,
But it only came out hard 50% of the time because we sent in an initially white electron. Yeah? What about the other 50%? Well, the other 50% of the time it cuts out the soft aperture and follows what I'll call the soft path to the mirror, mirror, hardness. And it was soft, mirror, mirror, hardness, you know it comes out soft. 50% of the time it comes out this way, and then it will come out hard. 50% it follows the soft path, and then it will come out soft. Was this the logic? Good. How many people agree with this?
no.
Solid. How many people disagree?
Yeah.
No abstention.
Nope.
Okay. So here's the here's a prediction. Surveys. Oh, yep.
Question. Could you justify that prediction without talking about, oh, well, half the electrons were initially measured to be hard and half were initially measured to be soft, by just saying, well, we have a hardness box, and then we join the beams of electrons together again, so we don't know anything about it. So it's just like sending white electrons into one hardness box instead of two.
Yeah, that's a really tempting argument, isn't it? So let's see. We're going to see in a few minutes whether
we join the beams of electrons together again, so we don't know anything about it. So it's just like sending white electrons into one hardness box instead of two.
Yeah, that's a really tempting argument, isn't it? So let's see. We're going to see in a few minutes whether that kind of an argument is reliable or not. But so far, we've been given two different arguments that lead to the same prediction, 50-50. Yeah? Question?
50-50, no.
The electrons interact between themselves, like when you get them together.
Yeah.
Whoa, okay, so these guys are messing with
Here's
me.
a question. Look, you're sending a bunch of electrons into this apparatus, but if I take two, look, I took 802. You know, take two electrons and you put them close to each other, what do? Right? They interact with each other through a potential, right? So yeah, we're being a little bold here, throwing a bunch of electrons and saying, oh, they're independent. So I'm going to do one better. I will send them in one at a time. One electron through the apparatus.
Yes.
And then it will wait for 6 weeks.
Right.
And then I'll say, see, you guys laugh, you think that's funny, but there's a famous story of a guy who did a similar experiment with photons. Okay, French guy.
I'm giving photons.
And, I mean, the French, they know what they're doing. So
Smoking
he wanted
spliffs.
to do the same experiment with photons, but the problem is if you take a laser and you shine it into your apparatus, then there are like 10 to the 18 electrons in there at any or photons in there at any given moment. And the photons, who knows what they're doing with each other.
That's interesting.
Photons.
So this is fucking hilarious. This is what he's describing right here.
But the problem is if you take a laser
When
and you shine...
I'm this laser and I'm this apparatus where everybody in human plane of Earth is living, still live streaming good. I'm shining into this apparatus of we all have this body in America, and this is where I'm exercising my fucking First Amendment, right?
it into your apparatus, then there are like 10 to the
18 photons. Once you turn 18, individual. And I say this because like you can sign things, and you know, when you're younger, you don't have a commitment to things, but like you get a mortgage, they're coming after you. So when you're 18 and make those choices, yeah, that's that one guy in the front, he was saying
18 electrons in there at any or photons in there at any given moment.
So
and
the photon
photons,
is
who knows what they're doing with each other.
The photon
right?
is
so,
that there's two adults, and two adults, you never know what the fuck they're gonna do with each other.
So I want to send in one photon, but the problem is it's very hard to get a single photon. Very hard. So what he did, kid you not, he took an opaque barrier. I don't remember what it was. It was some sort of film on top of glass. I think it was some sort of oil tar film. Barton, do you remember what he used? Okay, so he takes a film, and it has this opaque property such that the photons that are incident upon it get absorbed.
Yes, I'm absorbing the protons.
A photon manages to make its way through. Literally, like once every couple of days. Okay, now, or a couple of hours, I think. So it's going to take a long time to get any sort of statistics. But he has this advantage that once every couple of hours or whatever, a photon makes its way through. That means inside the apparatus, if it takes a picosecond to cross, triumph, right?
Facts,
That's the week I was talking about.
Yeah,
so he does this experiment. But as you can tell, you start the experiment, you press go, and then you wait for 6 months.
Yeah.
Side note on this guy, liked boats. Really liked yachts.
No shit.
So he had 6 months to wait before doing a beautiful experiment, having the results. So what did he do? Went on a world tour in his yacht.
No shit.
Comes back, collects the data, and declares victory because indeed he saw the effect he wanted.
Wow.
So I was not kidding.
That's sick, dude. No way.
We really do wait. So I will take your challenge.
You guys do.
Single electron, throw it in.
Throw me in.
Let it go through the apparatus. It takes mere moments. wait for a week, send in another electron. No electrons are interacting with each other.
Right.
Okay? Just a single electron at a time going through this apparatus.
Huh.
Other complaints.
So that's what questions are?
Oh, you'll get them. I have a hard time resisting. So
I'll take any question.
So here's the experiment. Here's a prediction. 50-50. We now have two arguments for this.
You
So
can hear
again,
mine.
let's vote after the second argument. 50-50. How many people?
Who's voting?
You sure? Positive? Okay. How many people don't think so?
Democracy. Aren't you here
Very
to tell us,
small
bro? Aren't you here to tell us?
It's correct. Yay! Okay. So good. So.
What? Nah,
Sure?
he pulled the slick
Positive?
one.
Okay. How many people don't think so? Very small dust. Okay. It's correct. Yay! Okay.
No way.
So good. So. I like messing with you guys. So.
Yeah.
So remember, we're going to go through a few experiments first, where it's going to be very easy to predict the results. We've got 4 experiments like this to do,
Oh,
and then we'll go
shit.
into the interesting examples. But we need to go through them so we know what happens,
Okay.
so we can make an empirical argument rather than an in-principle argument.
Okay.
So there's the first experiment. Now I want to run the second experiment.
How is it 50-50? You didn't explain
The second
it.
experiment.
Shit.
Same as the first, a little bit louder, a little bit worse.
Yeah, this is me. Now I'm into it.
Sorry. The second experiment, we're going to send in hard electrons,
Yeah.
and we're going to measure color. That
How?
out. Okay.
How do you
so
measure
again,
color?
Let's look at the apparatus. We send in hard electrons.
When you measure
and
it,
our
you stop
apparatus
the location.
Is hardness box, with a hard and a soft aperture.
Yes, yes. This is complex, man.
And now we're going to measure the color at the output.
What? How? How do you know?
Color. What have I been doing? Black. And now I want to know what fraction come out black and what fraction come out white. We're using lots of monkeys in this process. Okay, so this is not rocket science. Rocket science isn't that complicated. Neuroscience is much harder. This is not neuroscience.
Whoa, it's not
So
neuroscience.
let's figure out what this is. Predictions. So again, think about your prediction in your head. Come to a conclusion. Raise your hand when you have an idea.
It depends. You can't measure them.
Just
It's
because
not
you don't
always
raise your hand doesn't mean I won't
50-50.
call
This is exactly it. Yeah, I know you don't want to call on me. What is he waiting for?
50-50 black and white. I like it. Tell me why. Great. So the statement, I'm going to say that slightly more slowly. That was exactly, that was an excellent argument. We have a hard electron. We know
In
that hardness
H.
boxes are persistent. You
Hardness
send a hard
box.
electron in, it comes out hard. So every electron incident upon our apparatus will transit across the hard trajectory.
Why?
It will bounce, but it is still hard because we've already done that experiment. The mirrors do nothing to the hardness. So we send a hard electron into the color box, and what comes out? Well, we've done that experiment too.
You don't know.
Hard into color, 50-50. So the prediction is 50-50. This is your prediction. Is that correct? Awesome. Okay. Let us vote.
Would it be 100?
How many people think this is correct? Gusto, I like it. How many people think it's not?
100% both.
All right. Yay. This is correct.
What?
Okay, third experiment, slightly more complicated.
So this is the definition of
But
the
we have to go through these to
superposition.
get to the good stuff.
They're trying to fucking prove that I am the other
me for a moment.
superposition.
Third.
Thank you so much. I'm just proving
send
quantum
in-
physics right here.
White elect.
Yeah, I gotta piss. We back. Alright, so this is I'm already the superposition.
Electrons. And then measure the color at the output port. So now we send in white electrons, same beast,
Into the
and our
hardness
apparatus
box.
is hardness box.
The
with
hardness
a
box is
hard path
hard
and a
though.
soft path.
This is complex.
Mirror.
Really complex.
Mirror. Box. Join together into our out, and now we send those out electrons into a color box.
Right.
Okay, and our color box.
Black and white.
And now the question is, how many come out black and how many come out white? Okay. Again, think through the logic, follow the electrons, come up with a prediction. Raise your hand when you have a prediction.
50-50. No. 100% white. 75? Yeah, 50-50. I'm going to go with that. And this is probably just going to demonstrate that there's 3 things, and I'm going to just be on 1/3 of them because I'm trying to come at it with the negative approach. He's the professor in these eyes. I'm just trying to be demonstrating what quantum mechanics is.
With equal probability.
Yeah. And then it'll go back to our color box, but earlier when we did the same thing without the weird path changing, it came out 50-50 still. So I would say still 50.
Great. So let me
this
say
is
that
path
again
changing
out loud
right here.
and
I'm like
tell me if
changing
this
my
is an
path.
accurate sort of extension of what you said.
Insane.
I'm just going to use more words, but it's, I think, the same logic. We have a white electron, initially white electron. We send it into a hardness box. When we send a white electron into a hardness box, we know what happens. 50% of the time
I'm
it comes
acting
out hard,
white
the
right
hard
now.
aperture.
I am smart.
50% of the
I
time
know
it comes out the soft
everything.
aperture. Consider those electrons that came out the hard aperture. Those electrons that came out the hard aperture
And
will
white
then
is what
transit
is the
across system,
establishment in the
preserving their hardness
institution.
by virtue of the fact that these mirrors preserve hardness, and end up at a color box. When they end at the color box, when that electron, the single electron in the system, ends at this color box, then we know that a hard electron entering the color box comes out black or white 50% of the time. We've done that experiment too. So for those 50% that came out hard, we get 50-50. Now consider the other 50%. The other half of the time, the single electron in the system will come out the hard box, come out the soft aperture. It will then proceed along the soft trajectory, bounce, not changing its hardness, and is then a soft electron incident on a color box. But we've also done that experiment, and we get 50-50 out black and white. So those electrons that came out hard come out 50-50, and the electrons that come out soft come out 50-50. And the logic then leads to 50-50 twice.
Oh, so he just pulled me into the soft side by the way he described it.
Was that an accurate statement of the
I already knew.
Good. It's a pretty reasonable extension. Okay, let's vote. How many people agree with this one? Okay, and how many people disagree?
I know.
Yeah. Okay, so vast majority agree, and the answer is no. This is wrong. In fact, of these, 100% come out white.
No way.
And 0 come out black.
So this is
Never,
it.
ever does an electron come out the black aperture.
What? What?
I would like to quote what a student just said.
So then
because
I am
it's
demonstrating
actually the next line in my
superposition.
notes, which is, what the hell is going on?
Still. I'm
So-
still demonstrating it.
Let's run a series of follow-up experiments to tease out what's going on here. Okay, so something very strange. Let's just all agree, something very strange just happened.
It's the
Okay, we sent a single electron
Is
in,
it-
and that single electron comes out the hardness box. Well, it either came out the hardness box or it came out the it either came out the hard aperture or the soft aperture. And if it came out the hard, we know what happens. If it came out the soft, we know what happens. And it's not 50-50, right? So
Is this
we
America?
need to improve the situation. Hold on a second. Oh, hold on one second. Okay.
Okay.
So,
Will do,
well,
sir.
okay, go ahead. Yeah.
So for the second hardness box, are we collecting both the soft and hard outputs?
The second, you mean the first hardness
No,
box?
not that one.
Or the one,
Yeah, that one.
This one? Which one? Sorry. This guy? Oh, that's a mirror, not a hardness box. So all this does, oh, thanks for asking. Okay, yeah, sorry, I wish I had a better notation for this, but I don't. There's a classic, well, I'm not going to go into it. So remember that thing where I can't stop myself from telling stories? So all this does is just a set of mirrors. It's a set of fancy mirrors, and all it does is it takes an electron coming this way or an electron coming this way, and both of them get sent out in the same direction. It's like a beam joiner.
Right. That's
it's
the
like
whole point of a
junction.
lecture. Like, you're listening to him, and what?
All it is. Telling stories. So,
He's listening to me.
So all this does is just a set of mirrors. It's a set of fancy mirrors, and all it does is it takes an electron coming this way or an electron coming this way, and both of them get sent out in the same direction. It's like a beam joiner.
Whoa, hold up.
It's It's just a set of mirrors. It's a set of fancy mirrors, and all it does is it takes an electron coming this way or an electron coming this way, and both of them get sent out in the same direction. It's like a beam joiner, right? It's like a Y junction.
Wow.
That's all it is. So if you will, imagine the box is a box, and you take, I don't know, Professor Zwiebach, and you put him inside, and every time an electron comes up this way, he throws it out that way, and every time it comes in this way, he throws it out that way. And he'd be really ticked at you for putting him in a box, but he'd do the job well. Yeah.
This also works if you go 1 electron at a time?
This works if you go 1 electron at a time. This works if you go 14 electrons at a time. It works. It works reliably. Yeah?
Just maybe we'll explain this 1 second, but what's the difference between this experiment and that one?
Yeah, I know. Right? Yeah. So the question was, what's the difference between this experiment and the last one? Yeah, good question. So we're going to have to answer that. Yeah.
Like, you're mixing, again, the hardness, so it's like as you were measuring it along, right?
Apparently, it's a lot like we were measuring it, right? Because we send in the white electron, and at the end, we get out that it's still white. So somehow, this is like not doing anything. But how does that work? So that's an excellent observation, and I'm going to build you now a couple of experiments that tease out what's going on. And you're not going to like the answer. Yeah?
How were the white electrons generated in this experiment?
The white electrons were generated in the following way. I take a random source of electrons. I rub a cat against a balloon, and I charge up the balloon. Okay. And so I take those random electrons, and I send them into a color box. And we have previously observed that if you take random electrons and throw them into a color box and pull out the electrons that come out the white aperture, if you then send them into a color box again, they're still white. So that's how I've generated them.
Why did you pick white?
I could have done it by rubbing the cat against glass or rubbing it against me, right? Just stroke the cat. But any randomly selected set of
He's
electrons sent
stroking
into
the
a color
cat.
box.
So cats are like kind of like negative energies. It's just interesting, the meaning of cats. He's almost stroking the cat. Like, this is promoting black and white. Like, you couldn't have picked any other fucking colors, man. I just don't get it. And hard and soft. Just kind of ironic, yeah, but the language.
And then from which you take the white electrons. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's a really good question. So I don't want to, here's something that I'm going to be very careful not to say in this class to the degree possible.
Facts.
I'm not going to use the word to know.
Yes.
Good. Measure is a very slippery word too.
Measure
I used
is.
it here because I couldn't really get away with not using it. But we'll talk about that in some detail later on in the course. For the moment, I want to emphasize
Measure.
that it's tempting but dangerous at this point to talk about whether you know or don't know, or whether someone knows or doesn't know. For example, the monkey inside knows or doesn't know, right? So let's try to avoid that and focus on just operational questions of what are the things that go in, what are the things that come out, and with what probabilities. And the reason that's so useful is that it's something that you can just do, right? There's no ambiguity about whether you've caught a white electron in a particular spot. Now, in particular, the reason these boxes are such a powerful tool is that you don't measure the electron, you measure the position of the electron. You get hit by the electron or you don't. And by using these boxes, we can infer from their position the color or the hardness, okay? And that's the reason these boxes are so useful. So we're inferring from the position, which is easy to measure. You get beamed or you don't. We're inferring the property that we're interested in.
Wow.
So
is the
really
FBI interested in my property as a
and
person?
we'll talk about it
talking
on and
about
off
this
the rest of
stuff?
the semester.
Yeah, you probably will. You just cut yourself off, walking away.
You have the setup, and you just take away the bottom right here.
Perfect question. Okay, this leads me into the next
What did he
experiment.
say? Just take.
Yeah.
So what happens if you have the setup, and you just take away the bottom right here?
Perfect question. Okay, this leads me into the next
Bottom
experiment. So
right
here's
there,
modification that, thank you, that's a great question. Here's a
Whoa.
modification of this experiment.
Whoa, bottom right.
So let's rig up a
The
small,
words.
hold on.
The
I
right
want to go
wrist
through the
to the
next series
left.
of experiments, and then I'll come back to questions. And these are great questions. So I want
Politics.
to rig up a small movable wall. Okay? A small movable barrier. And here's what this movable barrier will do. If I put the barrier in, so this would be in, the soft path.
I'm soft right now.
When I put the barrier in the soft path, it absorbs all electrons incident upon it and impedes them from proceeding. Okay?
Whoa.
So you put
So
a
since
barrier
I'm
in here,
smoking
put a barrier
and just
in the
watching your
soft path,
class,
no
I'm not
electrons
doing
continue
anything?
through. An electron incident cannot continue through. Okay? When I say that the,
Right.
that
You
the
just
barrier
plant a
is
seed,
out,
then
what I
what?
mean is it's not in the way. I've moved it out of the way. Cool?
Right.
So I want to run the same experiment
What do you move out of the way?
proceeding. Okay? So you put a barrier in here, put a barrier in the soft path, no
Yes.
electrons continue through. An electron incident cannot continue through.
Right. The barrier in the soft path
When I
was
say
that.
that
Just rewind.
that the barrier is out, what I mean is it's not in the way. I've moved it out of the way.
Yes.
Cool? So I want to run the same
Misunderstanding,
experiment,
yeah.
and I want to run this experiment in the following. I'm going to run the experiment using
So
the
I know I'm in
barriers
the box.
to
I know I'm
tease
fucking
out
here
how
watching
the
this video.
electrons
I'm actually
transit
listening
through
to it and paying
our
attention.
apparatus.
I'm receiving all the sound from it.
Okay.
Visually.
So, experiment 4.
Whoa.
Let's send in a white electron again. I want to do the same experiment we just did, and color at out,
Wasn't it experiment 804? 802 too?
but now with the wall in the south path.
This is lecture
Wall
hall or something. Oh,
in
8.04.
Soft. Okay, so that's this experiment. So we send in white electrons, and we send out, and at the output we measure the color. Okay, as before. And the question is, what fraction come out? What fraction come out? Black, and what fraction come out white?
There he goes. He's stumbling because I called him out on it.
Okay. So again, everyone think through it for a second. Just take a second. And this one's a little sneaky, so just feel free to discuss it with the person sitting next to you.
This guy? Yeah, I'll just talk with it with him. Show me that shit again, though. Alright, now they're just trying to show me how much of a loser I am. I get it. The FBI is really here. Anti-consciousness. Not the FBI. Some energies opposing me for some reason. The superposition energy. Duh. Yeah. What's he trying to figure out? Let me see. I'm talking to my phone. Some shit just came up. So you send in a white electron through that barrier. Hard or soft? No soft. I gotta think of this one after.
All right.
That's why he knows. I just paused. He gave me enough time.
All right. Now that everyone's had a
After
quick
I
second to think
realized
through
it.
this one,
Thank you.
let me just talk through what I'd expect
All right.
from the point of these experiments, and then we'll talk about whether this is reasonable.
Okay.
So the first thing I expect is that, look, if I send in a white electron, I put it in a hardness pass, I know that 50% of the time it goes out hard and 50% of the time it goes out soft. If it goes out the soft aperture, it's going to get eaten by the barrier, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to get eaten by the barrier. So
Yes.
first thing I predict is that the output should be down by 50%. However, here's an important bit of physics, and this comes to the idea of locality. I didn't tell you this, but these arm lengths in the experiment I did, 3,000 kilometers long. 3,000 kilometers long.
Okay.
That's too minor. 10 million kilometers long.
Oh
Really
shit,
long.
bro. Oh
Very
shit.
long.
Super
Now
long.
imagine an electron that enters this, a initially white electron. If we had the barriers out,
10 million
if the barrier was
kilometers.
out, what do we get? 100% white, right? We just did this experiment to our surprise.
Right.
So if we did this, we get 100%. That means that any electron going along the south path comes out white. Any electron going along the heart path goes out white. They all come out white. So now if imagine I do this. Imagine I put a barrier in here 2 million miles away from this path.
Diagonal?
How does a hard
They're
electron
definitely not a
along
right
this
angle.
path know that I put the barrier there? And I'm going to make it even more
I
silky
put
for
it. Yeah, you just
I'm
put
gonna
another barrier
insert
there.
the barrier along the path after I launch the electron into the apparatus. Okay? And when I send in the electron, I will not know at that moment nor will the electron know, because they're not very smart, whether the barrier is in place. And this is going to be millions of miles away from this guy. Okay? So an electron out here can't know. It hasn't been there. It just hasn't been there.
Right.
It can't know.
Bring me there.
But we know that when we ran this apparatus
Bring me
without the
there.
barrier in there, they came out 100% white.
Bring me. What
But
am
it
I
can't
now?
possibly know
I'm
whether the
human.
barrier's in there or not. Right? It's over here.
Yeah, the other barrier. 'Cause
So
they're
what
not
this
me in.
tells us is that we should expect the output to be down by 50%.
Yes.
But
Huh?
all the electrons that do make it through must come out white because they didn't know that there was a barrier there. They didn't go along that path. Yeah.
No way.
Oh, I was just sorry. No, thank you. Thank you. That was a slip of the tongue. I was making fun of the electron. So,
Wow.
So in that particular case, I was not referring to my or your knowledge. I was referring to the electron's tragically impoverished knowledge.
Wow. No shit. Yeah. So
yeah.
this is.
Well, here's the more troubling thing. Imagine it didn't come out 100% white.
Hard and
Then the
white.
electron would have demonstrably not gone along the south path or the soft path. It would have demonstrably gone through the hard path because that's the only path available to it. And yet it would still have known that millions of miles away there's a barrier on a path it didn't take. So which one's more upsetting to you? The south path or the soft path?
Whoa.
It would have been a troubling thing. Imagine it didn't come out 100% white. Then the electron would have demonstrably not gone along the south path or the soft path. It would have demonstrably gone through the hard path because that's the only path available to it. And yet it would still have known that millions of miles away there's a barrier on a path it didn't take. So which one's more upsetting to you? Okay? And personally, I find this one the less upsetting of the two.
The superposition.
So the prediction is our output should be down by 50%
I'm
because
not
half of
upset.
them get eaten, but they should all come out white because those that didn't get eaten can't possibly know that there was a barrier here.
Right. Till you brought
Millions
it
of
up.
miles away.
Yeah, millions of miles till you brought it up.
So we run this experiment, and here's the experimental result. In fact, the experimental result is yes, the output is down by 50%, but no, not 100% white, 50% white.
Wow.
50% white. The barrier, if we put the barrier in the hardness path, still down by 50%, and it's at odds, 50-50. How could the electron know? I'm making fun of it. Yeah.
I guess my question is, before we asked how it knows there's a block in one of the paths, how did it know before?
This glitched.
The barrier, if we put the barrier in the
Yeah, I
hard
don't
and
fuck
white.
with that. That's weird.
The barrier, if we put the barrier in the
Is
hardness
this a
path.
hologram?
The barrier, if we put the barrier in the hardness path. If we put the barrier in the
Right
hardness
then I had a
path,
big thought too.
still down by
I was
50%,
confused.
and it's at odds, 50-50.
So now it's still odds. He's right and odds are I'm
How
right.
could the electron know?
How do I know? Because
making
I
fun of it.
fucking
Yeah.
am Chris motherfucking Payne. I'm a philosopher.
Before we asked how it knows there's a block in one of the paths, how did it know before over there that there were two paths combined?
Excellent.
How did I know?
So actually,
Because
this
I
problem was there
rewinded
already
it.
in the experiment we did. All we've done here is tease out something that was existing in the experiment, something that was disturbing, the presence of
Yes.
those mirrors and the option of taking two paths
Wow.
somehow changed the way the electron behaved.
Mm-hmm.
How is that possible? And here we're seeing that very sharply. Thank you for that excellent observation.
What?
Yeah.
Hold up.
It
I
was
was
existing in
disagreeing
the
to
experiment,
something.
something that was disturbing. The presence of those mirrors and the option of taking two paths somehow changed the way the electron behaved.
The
How is that
options of
possible?
taking two
And
paths
here we're seeing that very
changed
sharply.
the way the
Thank you for that
electron
excellent observation.
behaved.
Yeah.
What if you replace the two mirrors with color boxes so that one, like both color boxes can
Yeah.
either hard or soft, and then you recombine all four meanings and then put it through that last color box?
Yeah, so that's a totally reasonable. So the question is basically, let's take this experiment and let's make it even more intricate by, for example, replacing these mirrors by color boxes. Okay, so here's the thing I want to emphasize. Something that
I'm mirroring you.
I
Yeah.
strongly
You
encourage
guys,
you
yeah.
to think through.
That's like, right? He's trying to tell them what it's like to fucking learn. Your body is a fucking clump of electrons. And he's saying this with such a smile. He's like, yo, I really hope you learn because, like, think through the example. To learn, you have to mirror their thoughts. Mirror something.
Through that example, and in particular, think through that example. Come to my office hours and ask me about it.
Yeah.
So that's going to be studying a different.
Yeah, because he'll
experiment.
get paid for that.
And different experiments are going to have different results. So we're going to have to deal with that on a case-by-case basis. It's an interesting example, and ask me about it.
Yeah. Look at that. That's,
something that, well, how to say it? I strongly encourage you
yeah, and he's like, yo, come on, man. I'm alone out here in the science department.
through that example. And in
My wife
particular, think through that example, come to my office hours
and
and ask
family
me about it.
love the science, but I need friends
so that's going to be
outside.
studying a different experiment. And different experiments are going to have different results. So we're going to have to deal with that on a case-by-case basis. It's an interesting example, but it's going to take us a bit afar from where we are right now. But after we get to the punchline from this, come to my office hours and ask me exactly that question, okay?
So I
Yeah.
just gave a punchline, but he was getting paid for some shit. He's feeling under pressure now. He's low.
How do I know the boxes work? Well, these are the same boxes we used from the beginning. We tested them over and over.
How did you first check it if it's working, if it's always trying to make it just
Wow.
How to say, there's no other way to build a box that does the properties that we want, which is that you send in color and it comes out color again, and the mirrors behave this way. There's, any box that does those first set of things, which is what I will call a color box, does this too.
Wow.
There's no other way to do it.
So America
I don't
puts
mean this
people in
because,
color
like,
boxes.
no one's, test.
I haven't tested it, but that's how people fucking think in America.
Oh, sure, you can. You take the electron that came out of the color box. That's what we mean by saying it's white. Well, but that's what it means to say the electron is white, right? It's like, how do you know
That's
that my
what it
name is Alan? You say
means.
Alan, and I go, what? Right? But you
What?
actually the electron that came out of the color box. That's what we mean by saying it's white.
Alan.
Well, but that's what it means to say the electron is white, right? It's like, how do you know that my name is Alan? You say Alan, and I go, what? Right?
So-
but you might say, well, like, look, that's not a test of whether I'm Alan. It's like, well, what is the test of what you? That's how you test. What's your name?
You're
I'm
like
Alan.
a
Oh,
dog
great.
or spawn to shit.
So that's what I mean by white. Now, you might
Wow.
quibble that that's a stupid thing to call an electron, and I grant you that.
We're
But it is
electrons.
nonetheless a property that I can
Names
empirically
are
engage.
not a stupid
Okay,
thing
so
to give.
I've been told that I never ask
electrons.
questions from the people on the right. Yeah.
Embrace who you are, and I'm coming from the right.
No.
I don't know this wall is
experiment
here.
has been done
No one's
again,
told me.
again by some French guys.
Wow.
There's this, the French. Look, dude.
Yeah.
So
the French
there's this
guys
guy
are worried
Alain
about Cape
Aspect,
Haines smoking spliffs.
great experimentalist, great physicist, and he's done lots of beautiful experiments on exactly this topic. And send me an email, and I'll post some example papers and reviews
No.
by him. And he's a great writer. So just send me an email to him.
Tell me his name.
Okay, so we're lowish on time, so let me
right.
move on.
He's hustling. That's right. He is
So
doing
what I
a
want
job.
to do now is I want to take the lesson of this experiment and the observation that was made a minute ago that in fact the same problem was present
You see, he
when
gets
we ran
carried
this experiment.
away.
Got
He
100%.
wanted to
We should
just
have been freaked
barely
out already.
ask her.
And I want to
He's like,
think through what that's telling us about the electron.
She's like, yo, let me get that extra point, yo. Or maybe she engaged with it. Maybe she enjoys it.
The single electron as it transits the apparatus.
Transiting the apparatus. I enjoy this shit.
The thing is, at this point, we're in real trouble.
Yes, because
Here's the reason.
I'm a philosopher.
Consider a single electron inside the apparatus. And I want to think about the electron inside the apparatus while all walls are out.
Yep.
So it's this experiment. Consider the single electron. We know with total confidence, with complete reliability, that every electron will exit this color box out the white aperture. We've done this experiment. We know it will come out white.
Really?
Yes?
Not always. Depends on the hardness.
Here's my question. Which route did it take?
Which route did it take? How do you know?
Not a spoiler. Which route did it take?
The direct?
I'm asking you the question. That's why you
Why
care.
do you care what route? Yeah.
I'm the professor here.
Wow,
What
yeah.
is this?
Wow. Holy
Come
fuck.
on.
Wow.
Which route did it take?
No way. Caring is a different element of the heart.
Okay, let's think through the possibilities.
Oh, man, he's
Grapple with
fired
this
up.
question in your belly.
He's
Let's think through
fired
the
up.
possibilities. First off, did it take the hardness path?
You
So
don't
as
know.
it transits through the single electron transiting through this apparatus, did it take the hard path or did it take the soft? These are millions of miles long, millions of miles apart. This is not a, ridiculous question. Did it go
Yeah, it is.
millions of miles that direction, millions of miles that direction? Did it take the hardness path?
How do you know?
Ladies and gentlemen, did it take the hardness path, the hard path? Well, we ran this experiment by putting a wall in the soft path. And if we put a wall in the soft path,
So they hit my soft path.
then we know it took the hard path because
But
no other electrons
allow
come
me
out
to
except those
laugh,
that went
and
through
now
the
I'm
hard path,
explaining
correct?
it, and I'm giving
On
you
the
the
other
hard
hand,
path.
if it went through the hard path, it would always it would come out 50% of the time white, 50% of the time black. But in fact, in this apparatus, it comes out always 100% white.
Whoa.
It cannot have taken the hard path.
Why?
No.
I had to have taken the soft path. It had taken both.
Did it take the soft path?
It took both. It took both in the beginning, man.
Same argument, different side, right? No. Well, this is not looking good.
Because I'm the
Well,
superposition.
look, maybe this was suggested. Maybe it
I'm
took
combining
both.
this whole thing
Maybe
right now.
electrons are sneaky little devils that split in two,
and-
and part of it goes one way and part of it goes the other.
No,
Maybe it took both paths.
it did.
So this is easy. You can test this one. And here's I'm going to test this one.
I'm the professor now, bitch.
Oh, sorry. Actually, I'm not going to do that
New
yet.
board. Give me the new board.
So
No.
we can test this one. So if it took both paths, here's what you should be able to do. You should be able to put a detector along each path, and you'd be able to get half an electron on one side and half an electron on the other. Or maybe two electrons,
Where
one on
does
each
the
side and one on
detector
the
come
other.
in?
Right? So this is the thing that you'd predict if you said it went both. So here's what we'll do. We will take detectors, we will put one along the hard path and one along the soft path. We will run the experiment and then observe whether and ask whether we see two electrons, we see half and half, what do we see? And the answer is you always see one electron on one of the paths.
Wow, yes.
You never see half an electron.
You see the
You never see a
whole
squishy
spirit.
electron. You see one electron on one path,
Whole Chris
period.
right here.
It did not take both.
No.
You've never seen an electron
introduced
split in
it.
two, divided, confused.
You introduced it to me.
No.
What?
Well, it didn't take the hard path. It didn't take the soft path. It didn't take
It took the
both.
Chris Payne
There's one
path.
option left.
Yeah, yeah.
Neither. Well, I say neither. but,
Yeah. Y'all
so,
taking the K Payne route.
What about neither? And that's easy. Let's put a barrier in both paths.
Ain't no barriers here.
And then
Whoa.
what happens? Nothing comes out.
A barrier
right?
in both paths, right?
So, no.
This is free will right here. This
Okay.
is freedom of speech and
So now,
independency.
to repeat an earlier prescient remark from one of the students, what the hell? So here's the world
Yeah,
we're
what?
facing. I want you to think
You
about
didn't
this. Take
answer
this
it.
seriously. Here's the world we're facing, and when I say here's the world we're facing, I don't mean just these experiments. I
Wow,
mean
there's
the
always
world
questions.
around you,
Right.
20-kilo mirrors, buckyballs. Here is what they do.
Yeah.
When you send them through an apparatus like this,
Right. We're always
every
just
single
trying to
object
learn.
that goes through this apparatus does not take the hard path. It does not take the soft path.
Yeah, it's a mix
It
of
doesn't
life.
take both, and it does not take neither.
Mm-hmm.
And that pretty much
Whoa.
exhausts the set of logical
It
possibilities.
takes a path, I think.
So what are our electrons doing when they're inside the apparatus?
No idea.
How do you describe
Wow.
an electron inside the apparatus? You can't say it's on one path, you can't say it's on the other, it's not on both, and it's not on either. What is it doing halfway through this experiment?
Trying to figure out what an electron is, and then
So if
trying
our
to figure out the
experiments are
next
accurate,
thing. Trying
to
to
the
figure
best
out.
of our ability
Wow.
to determine they are. And if our arguments are correct, and that's on me,
Yeah, this video's
then
gonna
they're doing
end, and I'm gonna have to
something.
find
These
the next
electrons
thing.
are doing something we just never thought of before.
You
Something
just
we've
never thought of
dreamt
before. Just
Something for which we don't really have good words in the English language.
wow.
Apparently, empirically, electrons have a way of moving, electrons have a way of being, which is unlike anything that we're used to thinking about.
Wow.
then so do molecules. And so do bacteria.
Wow.
So does chalk.
Wow.
It's just harder to detect in those objects.
Wow.
So physicists have a name for this new mode of being,
What is it?
and we call it superposition.
Yeah, no shit. Superposition.
Now, at the
6
moment,
years ago.
Superposition is code for, I have no idea what's going on.
Wow, right.
Okay? A usage of the word superposition would go something like this. An initially white electron inside this apparatus.
Yeah, this is where we need to go. Alright, this is just simple.
So physicists have a name for this new mode of being,
KPN 8.0.
and we call it superposition.
Yeah. Hey, buddy.
Now, at the moment, superposition is code for, I have no idea what's going on.
Code.
Okay.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
usage of the word superposition would go something like this. An initially white electron inside this apparatus,
Initially,
with the walls out,
and
is neither hard nor soft, nor both, nor neither.
Right.
It is, in fact, in a superposition of being hard
I'm trying
and
to
of
be
being
hard.
soft.
There's a lot of things that I could dissect with this.
This is why we can't meaningfully say this electron is some color and some hardness.
Right. I'm
Not
just
because our boxes
fucking
are
pain.
crude, and not because we're ignorant, though our boxes are crude and we are ignorant.
Right. I like to
It's
put them
deeper.
in a little bit
Having a
of
definite
my
color
own boxes
means
to show y'all.
not having a definite hardness, but rather being in a superposition of being hard and being soft.
Yeah. There's me still.
Every electron exists, or sorry, every electron.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Superposition is code for, I have no idea what's going on.
Code. Yeah,
The usage of the word superposition would go something like this. An initially white electron inside this apparatus,
Initially,
with the walls out,
and
is neither hard nor soft, nor both, nor neither.
Right.
It is, in fact, in a superposition of being hard.
I'm trying to be hard. There's a lot of things that I could dissect with
This is
this.
why we can't meaningfully say this electron is some color and some hardness,
Right. I'm
not
just
because our
fucking
boxes are
pain.
crude, and not because we're ignorant, though our boxes are crude and we are ignorant.
Right. I like to put them in a little bit of my own boxes to show
Not
y'all.
having a definite hardness, but rather being in a superposition of being hard and being soft.
Yeah. There's me still.
So physicists have a name for this new mode of being,
KPN 8.0.
and we call it superposition.
Yeah. yeah.
Exits a hardness box, either hard or soft. But not every electron is hard or soft. It can also be a superposition of being hard or being soft. The probability that we subsequently measure it to be hard or soft depends on precisely what superposition it is.
What superposition?
For example, we know that if an electron is in the superposition corresponding to being white, then there are even odds of it being subsequently measured to be hard or to be soft. So, to build a better definition of superposition, then I have no idea what's going on,
Yeah.
is going to require a new language. And that
Yes.
language is quantum mechanics.
Wow.
And the underpinnings of this language are the topic of the course. And developing a better understanding of this idea
That's
of
me.
superposition is what you have to do over the next 3 months.
Okay.
Now,
I'll get to it.
if all this troubles your intuition,
It
well,
does.
that shouldn't be too surprising.
Oh,
Your
wow.
intuition was developed by throwing spears and, running from tigers and catching toast as it
Wow.
jumps out of the toaster, right?
Right.
All of which involves things so big and with so much energy that quantum effects are negligible. As a friend of mine likes to say, you don't need to know quantum mechanics to make chicken soup. However, when we work in very different regimes, when we work with atoms, when we work with molecules,
Who's Adam?
when we work in the regime of very low energies and very small objects, your intuition is just not a reasonable guide. It's not that the electrons, and I cannot emphasize this strongly enough, it is not that the electrons are weird. The electrons do what electrons do. Yeah. This is what they do, and it violates your intuition, but it's true. The thing that's surprising is that lots of electrons behave like this. Lots of electrons behave like cheese and chalk. And that's the goal of 804.
Facts.
To step
get
beyond
money.
Your daily experience and your familiar
chalk.
intuition, and to develop an intuition for this idea of superposition. And we'll start in the next lecture.
I wonder if a computer could calculate my expanding knowledge instead of myself. Some guy sent me this, commented on my video, and I was like, what? Yeah, what up?
What's up?
Come on. Come through. You want the waffle? Hey. Back with it. What am I needing to look up? Yeah.
Good evening, everyone.
Turn something into nothing. Turn nothing into something.
Where's my jetpack? I wanted to arrive on a jetpack here at the Science Festival. I think that's much more appropriate. Anyway, it's great. It's great to be here. Think of me as your launch vehicle to an area of very sophisticated science. My role here in the program is to be the person who the scientists who we've gathered for this great session tonight will be able to say, no, John, that's actually not quite right. Actually, it's a little different from what you're describing, or my favorite, well, nonsense, John, that's actually ridiculous what you're saying. So you'll be hearing a lot of that tonight, in addition to just some things that I thought I would start with.
Wait, what?
It's important in a non-scientific way to introduce the subject, to give you a sense of the landscape of nothing that we're going to be talking about. One of the things that I've noticed is a show about nothing isn't exactly new. It was actually canceled some years ago. It's in reruns. But they've decided to reprise it here. So many of you are probably more sophisticated on this subject than you think. But what is not nothing? We're going to find out what it is, but what it is not is this, wearing black, like we do here in New York a lot. This is a Mets cap, if you look really carefully. Being a Mets fan is kind of like being in a densely compacted, collapsing universe. Whereas being a Yankees fan is more like being in an infinitely expanding universe.
I grew
Infinity
up Yankees all day.
and the idea of nothing register in popular culture.
Wow,
and I think I've got some examples
very
here.
Interesting, yeah.
In a very low-tech way.
Describes me.
Nothing
Holy shit.
we find in
I grew up
history
going to Yankees games and
in
stuff.
metaphors like this. Okay, that's a kind of a medieval view of history. All we are is dust in the wind. A slight update of that might be something like this, a more abstract notion. Mathematics, concept of zero, everybody understands that. And then, of course, this, I think, has much more kind of theoretical physics, quantum mechanical implications
What is he
here. You may
listening
recognize
to?
this song.
No is no, no is always no. If they say no, it means 1,000 times no.
And then, of course, there are the classics of the genre.
Emptiness.
You don't recognize John Cage?
Yeah.
I'd play all 4 minutes and 33 seconds, but we really don't have time here. But enough of my cheap shots on the concept of nothing. Let's welcome John Barrow out here. He's going to begin our program. It's always good to start a program on challenging subjects in abstract mathematics, physics, with a cosmologist, and John Barrow definitely fits that bill. He's a research professor of mathematical sciences in the Department of Applied Mathematics and Theoretical Physics at the University of Cambridge in England.
Wow.
The author of nearly 20 books for a general audience, including The Book of Nothing, and he's the director of the Millennium Mathematics Project, a mathematics education initiative for a history of nothing, a real one this time. Please welcome John Barrow.
Hey, it's a person. No way.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for borrowing.
If John Lennon and the Beatles have taught us anything, it's that nothing is real. But nothing is also surreal.
Whoa.
It creates all sorts of playful elaborations on the basic theme of how is it possible for nothing to be something. And you can see from this picture here a little potpourri of famous examples, from Shakespeare's mastery of the wordplay of the English language to John Cage's attempt, we've just heard, to define the absolute zero of sound precisely with 273 seconds of silence, to galleries which are full of blank canvases whose authors are all suing one another for breach of copyright. But nothing is not just a game. Dealing with the concept of nothing has been pivotal in all sorts of histories of fundamental ideas. So the study of how the concept of zero arose in some cultures in their counting systems and not in others, and why, how the empty set emerged in logic and the purposes to which it was put, are of great importance and interest. Philosophers grappled for a long time with how nothing could be something. The Greeks never had a zero in their counting system because they believed by allowing nothing to be something, they were sowing the seeds of internal contradiction. Both theology and cosmology to be something. The Greeks never had a zero in their counting system because they believed by allowing nothing to be something, they were sowing the seeds of internal contradiction. Both theology and cosmology found they had to come to grips with the idea of creation out of nothing. What did that mean? What did it entail? And what did it have to say about physics in the large?
Wow.
And then looking at physics more specifically, we come to focus upon the whole issue of the vacuum or the void.
Yeah,
does it
vacuum.
exist? How do
I'm
we
gonna
characterize it?
vacuum
What
with
does
this
it mean?
video right now, actually.
And what I want to do in these opening remarks is unwind some of the strands of the threads which bind together different ideas about the vacuum and the void in
Okay.
physics,
Okay, thank you.
starting near the beginnings of systematic thought with the Greeks and taking us quickly up to contemporary issues in cosmology and fundamental physics.
Cosmology.
Well, in
Oh, wow.
time of the ancient Greeks, there were really three
Cosmology is
interesting
studying
and
the
dominant
stars.
types of theory. Starting around 450 BC, you see the atomists like Democritus have a view of the universe in which they believe the universe was a great infinite void of empty space which was filled with small particles, which we would now call atoms. Hence the name the atomists for this group.
Wow.
So for them, empty space really could exist, and there were particles of matter which moved around within that void. The great opponent of that idea, 100 years later, 350 BC, is the great polymath Aristotle. He believed that there could not be a void. All motion and movement was created by contact between things. So you couldn't have atoms separated by empty space. They wouldn't be able to move. You couldn't have atoms of matter as basic because there would have to be empty space
With
between.
an edge of fixed stars.
For Aristotle, the vacuum was rather subtly described. It was a place where the presence of bodies was potentially possible, but
Whoa.
not actually possible.
Right, so
He
you could
believed
manifest
that the
that
vacuum could
universe
never be
was the
realized within our universe of space.
Vacuum
And for
could
Aristotle,
never
the
be
universe was
realized.
finite in extent. It had no
wow.
beginning in
We
time,
can
and
never
it
realize
had
our quantum
no end.
vacuum. Yeah, we can. What?
He had no concept of a world having a beginning
It's
because
God.
it would have to have emerged from nothing, and nothing
Everything is
could
God.
come from nothing.
And he
The
said
third
it's nothing.
picture was a Stoic picture in
Right.
which there were again
Weird.
stars and particles dotted within a finite universe, but
Yes.
everything was imbued with that sort of continuous ethereal fluid which was
Yes.
everywhere.
Word association.
The subtlety of the Stoic view was that although the universe was finite,
Manifestation.
the universe of stars and other objects, beyond it there was an extra cosmic void. So beyond the boundary of the universe, we find this sort of infinite extent of whatever you care to argue it should be, but it contains nothing.
Wow.
So here's our
Right
friend
now.
Aristotle,
Right
abstracted
now.
from Raphael's great picture. Here is a later image of this Aristotelian world
Art.
with a sharp boundary in space at its edge where the stars end. And beyond is
Yeah,
a
the
sort of
stars ended 'cause
mystical,
I said it was
great
art.
celestial machinery. The Stoic picture, a little distorted in the imagery here, this picture survived for a long time.
Me?
So in
Yeah,
his
I
early
lived
years,
around for
this
a
would
while.
have been the view of the world that Newton would have had. The extra cosmic void beyond and the
Whoa,
world of the
that's
ether
sick.
and
If
the
I'm
stars
Stoic.
within.
Wow.
Well, it was Aristotle's picture of the world which really won out and was influential for another 1,500 years.
That's nuts.
It became mingled with the Christian, Judeo-Christian view of the world, and so the idea there was no beginning was eventually replaced. Particularly influential thinkers like St. Augustine created the view that the world was created out of nothing. And not just the world, but things like time and space and the rules that govern the world came into being then as well. The whole Aristotelian view of the vacuum and the world was taken up by physicists in medieval times in all sorts of interesting ways.
Medieval times.
The challenge
What
was
is
to
that?
try to accommodate the notion of vacuum in physics and
Yeah.
within theology.
You got a notion of the vacuum.
Theologians of the time would
So I'm
regard
trying to
the
demonstrate-
vacuum as something,
I don't know.
if not evil, then undesirable.
Mine's not
The
evil,
vacuum
but
was,
you
after all, what the world was made out of.
Right.
It was something God had rejected, and the
Whoa.
vacuum was somewhere where God would not be.
Mm.
So this was why we should all abhor a vacuum. Eventually, these views were rather overthrown by theologians in the 13th century who regarded the transcendence of God, the power to do whatever he wished, as being more important than the requirement that God should be everywhere. And so began rather more sophisticated arguments about the nature of the vacuum in physics. And on this slide, you can see a number of the great medieval thought experiments that are so fascinating. An ancient one that began with Lucretius in about 60 BC was to have two sliding sheets. So these might be of very finely polished material or metal. And the argument was, if you join them together and then separate them, instantaneously you should make a vacuum. Because when they're stuck together, there's nothing in between. When you separate them, then very briefly you must have a vacuum in place before the air rushes in to fill it.
Wow, okay.
Aristotle claimed that there's never a true vacuum. There's always some air caught in there at the beginning. And then others argued, like Burley, that if there really was a true vacuum, you would never be able to separate the two plates. But then others, like Bacon, pointed out that you don't need the plates to run this argument. If you drop anything, suppose this triangle with a sharp corner here, you drop it on the ground, then instantaneously you must create the same surface problem. There must be instantaneously a vacuum. So if the point was not perfectly sharp, maybe there would be a little gap there. And there couldn't be a vacuum. So back and forth went these arguments about whether it was possible to create a vacuum, whether you could do it just temporarily and it was unstable and quickly filled. And some people like Burley introduced this unusual concept that there was what he called a celestial agent. There was a force in nature that always acted to stop a vacuum forming within the universe. And Bacon and others challenged this type of idea. Could you have a law of nature that was negative? How could you have a law that said something does not happen, rather than a principle that governs what does happen? I mention this because in modern cosmology and the study of black holes, Roger Penrose is famous for putting forward the notion of so-called cosmic censorship, that infinities never form in the collapse of matter in the universe. They're always cloaked by black holes, so that you can never see them from outside. And he called this the principle of cosmic censorship, that singularities and infinities could never be viewed from the outside. It's very reminiscent of this celestial agency of the Middle Ages. Well, this was the great era, the 14th century and the 13th century, of these debates about the nature of the physics and the existence of the vacuum. An interesting spotlight on what people seriously argued about at that time. What came next in the 1600s was a period of experimental investigation. So Torricelli discovered the barometer in 1644. So if you take a tube of water, as he did first of all, you then invert it and place its base in a jug of water, then there will be a gap at the top of the tube. Just as when you do it with mercury, you have a gap at the top. And he was worried what was in that gap. There must be a vacuum in that gap. And then scientists like Pascal set about experimenting of what would happen if you took the barometer up a high mountain or a tower and noticed that the size of the gap at the top of the barometer would change, and began to understand that that vacuum at the top of the barometer was controlled by pressure, atmospheric pressure. Other scientists like Boyle carried out...
I react to barometric pressure. Wow.
Hi, I'm Steve Jones, and I'm going to explain what barometric pressure is. When you look at a weather map, you will see these kind of lines. and you'll see H's and L's on it. And then you'll see numbers, although you can't ever read the numbers, and the numbers aren't really very important. But what they represent are the actual pressure. Now, normal atmospheric pressure would be 1 bar, represented by the line here. And pressure may be lower or may be higher. And what you get are troughs of pressure and hills of pressure, you might say. It's just like a contour diagram. So where there is a higher pressure, the pressure gets higher and higher until you reach peak pressure here, or lower and lower until you reach the trough. Now, obviously, these differences in pressure, which we call barometric pressure, these differences are produced by the way the Earth's atmosphere moves and by the temperature of the surface and so forth. So there are various factors that affect the pressure of the air at any point.
Wow.
And of course, as we know, if we've got a high pressure area and a low pressure area, we would expect movement of air from one to the other. And it is this that produces wind currents and so forth. Well, it doesn't go straight like that. It tends to swirl, and it tends to swirl in a particular direction, and that is what produces the winds. Now, if it's a low pressure area, we have to remember that low pressure area is quite small, whereas the surrounding areas are quite large. And therefore, where you get a low pressure area, you would expect the winds to be strongest and the weather to be worse. Where there is a high pressure area, it's bound to be fairly stable because the air moving from the high pressure area has a bigger area to move from, moving into the low pressure area. So that is basically what barometric pressure is and how it works on the surface of the Earth.
Detailed experiments of what went on in tubes and enclosures which you pumped all the air out of. Some consequences are rather obvious. If you put living creatures, small mice or birds in there, they would die. And you would make them go unconscious, let more air in, and they would come back to consciousness. You could place magnetic fields across these evacuated regions and follow the passage of light through them. So there began a period where people realized that you could investigate the properties of light. And you would make them go unconscious, let more air in, and they would come back to consciousness. You could place magnetic fields across these evacuated regions and follow the passage of light through them. So there began a period where people realized that you could investigate the properties of regions and enclosures that seem to be devoid of everything. This picture here is of one of the most spectacular physics experiments that was ever done by Otto von Guericke, who was the mayor of Magdeburg in the 1650s. And he wanted to demonstrate to his general audience in his town the reality of the vacuum and the forces that it could create. And so what he did was to create two teams of horses here, and he had these two great hemispheres. They still exist in the city today, and he joined them, bolted them together, used pumps which then evacuated the hemispheres, so you have an almost vacuum inside. And then he demonstrated that if you put the hemispheres here, G'd up the horses and made them run off in different directions, they were incapable of pulling the two hemispheres apart. Whereas if you open the valves and let the air in, the two hemispheres would just gently roll apart. So this was the reality, the forcefulness of the vacuum. These experiments are really made rather beautifully real by this famous picture by Joseph Wright of Derby, painted nearly 100 years later. It's called Experiment with an Air Pump, and it's a fabulous exercise in the use of light. But the physics behind it, someone is carrying out for this audience an experiment with a vacuum jar. They're evacuating air from a jar that has a small bird in it and watching the bird lose consciousness, let the air back in, and the bird becomes conscious again. So this focuses everyone's attention upon the faces of the viewers, the audience, the bird, the instruments.
Wow.
Well, the next great step that took place in this picture was very significant. One of the greatest scientists of all time, James Clerk Maxwell, the discoverer of the theory of electromagnetism and much else besides.
Nice.
Maxwell was the person who first realized that when you talk about the vacuum in physics, you should not imagine it to be an empty box, which is what people had always imagined, that it was just nothing in ordinary language, empty space. Maxwell had a subtle definition of the vacuum. It was what was left when everything that can be removed has been removed. That can be rather different from absolutely nothing. And from Maxwell's picture of the vacuum, a number of different properties of the vacuum then became possibilities. The vacuum can change with time. There can be more than one possible vacuum state that any system can be in. Wow. And the vacuum need not be stable. So it can fall into another state rather quickly.
Yes.
So let's see a picture which illustrates those possibilities. So one should now think of a landscape of possible energies that a system could reside in.
Yes.
And the possible vacuum states are just like the valleys here. They're local minima in the sense that if you get wiggled away from them, you fall back downwards.
Right.
So there are, in this picture, many local vacua. They have different heights, so this vacuum has a lower energy, some sense is more evacuated than this one
When you
or this
interact
one.
with is a vacuum.
And if someone popped you in this one
Oh, shit.
and nudged you quite a lot,
Oh.
you could roll over the hill and fall into this one.
Wow, right.
And it could be that there's some erosion of the landscape by physical processes. It could change in time.
Wow.
So that some of these valleys were flattened out,
No.
and what was once a
internet
vacuum
now
state or a valley was a
can
valley
connect
no longer.
Everything.
So the whole picture becomes very different in modern physics. They are minima, local minima, energy states of a whole configuration of particles interacting maybe, of radiation, of magnets, or whatever. The next big jump in the story comes with the creation of a theory of quantum mechanics. And the quantum picture of the vacuum becomes rather remarkable and in some ways extraordinarily visible. The quantum picture of the vacuum adopts Maxwell's basic philosophy. But again, it's not just nothing. The quantum vacuum is seething with activity. Particles and antiparticles are appearing and disappearing, but doing so quickly that they're unobservable by Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. In 1948, a Dutch physicist called Hendrik Casimir proposed a remarkable experiment that was eventually performed and tested as predicted in the early 1970s by Steve Lamoureux. And what his experiment demonstrated is what's now called the Casimir effect. The quantum vacuum is a sea of all possible waves of variation of energy, of all possible wavelengths. And if you put these plates down in that vacuum, then all possible wavelengths of variation will be present outside the plates, but only some particular wavelengths can fit inside the plates.
Wow.
And so there's more wavelength, more pressure on the outside than there is between the plates. And so there will be a net force which pushes the plates together.
Thank you.
And that's the Casimir effect, the force of the quantum vacuum.
Wow.
This effect is not entirely quantum mechanical, and it's been pointed out that if you look back in the 19th century, in the 1820s, the French Navy was well aware that there was a similar effect that could have disastrous effects for their ships.
Wow.
And in their naval regulations, there was an instruction that in a heavy swell, when ships were rocking in the waves a lot, two high-rigged ships should not come closer than about 70 or 80 meters to one another.
No shit.
And they had noticed, just by observation and disaster, the same type of effect. That if you have two ships rocking side by side, then water waves that are created on the outside have all possible wavelengths, but only some will fit between the ships. So there is a net force on the ships which pushes them close together, and their rigging can become entwined, and there's a disaster.
Wow.
So this is a phenomenon that affects all types of wave fields.
How do we control water waves?
Well, most recently, the possibility of having the vacuum change has become a key ingredient in our understanding of the universe. The so-called inflationary universe exploits this possibility occurring in the very, very early stages of the universe. That it's possible for particular forms of elementary particle energy field to have energy landscapes that vary with time or with temperature. So you can start with one valley like this. As the temperature steadily falls, this maximum or this minimum rather, can drop and then open up and become much deeper. And if this state of the universe, shown as a point here, rolls and moves and evolves slowly enough into the new, deeper vacuum state, this will create a surge and acceleration in the expansion of the universe that has become known as inflation. Well, this scenario has added complexity in that it's possible for the vacuum state and the transition and the change and the deepening valley to be different from place to place in the universe. And so in some places you may fall into one valley, but in some other place, if you start up here, you fall into a different valley.
Wow.
And those differences can make all the difference in the world. So the different valleys that you might fall in might have different numbers of fundamental forces of nature occurring in them, different values of the constants of nature, even different numbers of large dimensions of space. So the properties that each vacuum state has attributed to it are absolutely crucial for the nature of the physics and the structure of the world that we eventually find ourselves living in 13 billion years later.
Wow.
In the last decade, the big problem in modern astronomy has been the issue that if we do fall into a particular vacuum state, this defines our universe today, how close should the energy of that final state be to the zero line? And for a long, long while, physicists thought, well, it's going to be exactly zero. There's no reason for it to be otherwise. Why should it be some strange, funny, absolutely tiny value? And they believed that we would eventually find a deep reason why it had to be absolutely zero today.
I had to be zero.
But then
today.
astronomers discovered that the universe was accelerating.
Yes.
And that was evidence that our universe today is dominated by an energy field, now known as dark energy, which is precisely the quantum vacuum energy of the universe.
Wow.
And this energy is not zero. It's absolutely tiny, 10 to the minus 120, extraordinarily unlikely value. If it had been just 10 times bigger, however, we wouldn't be here, because no galaxies, no stars would have been able to form.
Wow.
So here's the picture, care of NASA, of the long-term evolution of the universe and the two periods of history when the stress of the quantum vacuum drives and accelerates the expansion of the universe. So once very early on, during this period of inflation, when there's a huge expansion in the size of the universe, and then about 4 billion years ago, when this acceleration takes over again and is driving the universe to expand faster and faster into the future. Well, finally, what might become of us in the future? This result about the vacuum energy dominating the expansion of the universe today was a big surprise. But is there an even bigger surprise to come in the near or even the far future for our descendants? We've assumed just now that we're on the bottom floor, that we're in the basement level of the universe in terms of its vacuum state. But what if we're not? What if we're at one of these intermediate, almost vacuum states, and with a particular nudge, a high-energy cosmic ray, or some other slow evolution, there might be another dramatic transition to be made into a state whose physics we don't know, consequences of which we can't yet predict. So with that rather worrying thought, I'll leave you to the panel and to John. Thank you.
Wow.
Thanks for that.
That's where we are. How do you say that?
So we don't have high energy for our descendants. We've assumed just now that we're on the bottom floor, that we're in the basement level of the universe in terms of its vacuum state. But what if we're not? What if we're at one of these intermediate, almost vacuum states, and with a particular nudge, a high-energy cosmic ray, or some other slow evolution, there might be another dramatic transition to be made into a state whose physics we don't know, consequences of which we can't yet predict. So with that rather worrying thought, I'll leave you to the panel and to John. Thank you.
Thanks for that. So let me just review the bidding before I bring the panel out here. We've got the concept of zero and nothing, which is the beginning of the universe, and please sit down.
It's wholesome.
And we've got the concept of nothing, which involves the vacuum, as you've described. And then we've got this concept of nothing, which is the absence of everything, which seems to be a real moving target. Am I close to a kind of a beginning here?
Yes.
All right.
The others have got to have somebody to shoot.
All right,
Yes.
let's bring out Frank Wilczek, George Ellis, and Paul Davies. Please welcome them.
Hold up. He said 2 minutes.
Frank Wilczek, closest to me, received the 2004 Nobel Prize in Physics for his work on the strong interaction within the nucleus of the atom, which is the key to several major problems in particle physics and beyond, and relates to nothing in very interesting and cutting-edge ways that he will describe.
Wow.
George Ellis is Professor Emeritus of Applied Mathematics at the University of Cape Town and investigates the physical foundations of the flow of time. He is the co-author with Stephen Hawking of the large-scale structure of space-time. And Paul Davies, friend of this festival and familiar to me and you, I'm sure. Paul Davies is director of the Beyond Center for Fundamental Concepts in Science at Arizona State University and the co-director of the ASU Cosmology Initiative. His research interests range from the origin of the universe to the origin of life. Welcome to all of you.
Wow.
So, yes, indeed.
What are they different than me from?
Can we rank in scientific historical importance, George, the notion of the beginning as this zero, the abstract notion of mathematical zero as nothing, or the vacuum, which John elaborated on as nothing? Do you have a preference?
Well, I think what is really important is there are different kinds of nothing, and the most dramatic is, as was mentioned, the beginning of the universe. I wrote a book once called Before the Beginning, and that's a very paradoxical title because the beginning of the universe is understood in classical general relativity is not just the beginning of matter, it's the beginning of space and of time and of physics itself. And so before the beginning, there wasn't a before. You see, and our minds can't even begin to grasp that because there wasn't time there. And so you try to talk about a before the beginning, but the zero that was there or the nothing was there didn't have time, didn't have space, didn't have anything. And so physics really, really struggles to come to deal with that. There are theories some of my colleagues make about creation of the universe out of some previous fluctuation or something like that. And what they seem to be thinking of is that although there wasn't space, there wasn't time, the nothing that existed still had physics existing there in some kind of sense. In some sense, all the apparatus of quantum field theory existed before space and time came into existence. So
there had to be rules for a beginning.
There had to be rules for a beginning. So there was a nothing which didn't exist in any sense that we would recognize, but yet there was structure in that nothing out of which the universe came into existence.
So everyone was fascinated about nothing, but no one could actually find his address or actually turn out to date this
I'm right here,
nothing,
bitch.
even though he must have existed.
Chris Payne,
in your
philosopher
work,
Chris
Frank,
Payne, right
it
here.
seems to me, and John mentioned it a little bit in his introduction, that your domain is more the qualities of the vacuum that relate to the discovery really within the last 200 or 300 years that, okay, you can pump the air out and you can kill some birds and mice, but magnetism still works in the vacuum. Physical forces like gravity are still present in the traditional vacuum, but down at the quantum level, the fact that these forces are all there means that nothing is a richer concept. To get rid of all of these forces involves a nothing that I can barely understand. Can you help me with that?
Yes.
I could too.
I can try.
Thank you.
Imagine you're a fish, an intelligent fish.
Thank you.
And
we are all in a
imagine
school
that
of humans.
Fish have been evolving for a long time, got intelligent.
Yes, it has.
And eventually some of these fish would become physicists.
Wow.
And
an intelligent fish physicist, okay.
They would realize that
you can make me be a physicist.
the world that they saw around them, that they've taken for granted, that
Contact me.
was the way things had to be, is actually a substance, is water. We know it's water. They wouldn't have known. That
so
they
water.
could get simpler laws
What?
by imagining that there was no water, that they could,
Wow.
by a leap of imagination, imagine stripping out the water.
Okay,
also,
let me
they
just
noticed
hold
that there were
on that
little
moment there.
ripples in the water.
So there's a transition moment when the
Whoa, I'm
fish
transitioning,
think
sorry.
that the water is just everything.
Yes.
And when they
They
become
take-
aware that, no, in fact, water is a substance
When
that
they
they
take it-
operate in.
Right. They took it for granted.
Got it.
Thought its
Right.
properties were inevitable, and also that it was passive, that nothing could happen to it.
Wow.
Now, in this metaphor, we're the fish.
Yes.
We've realized that what appears to our eyes and our senses as nothingness is actually a medium with properties, that we can get better laws of physics, more basic laws,
Okay.
by ascribing properties like a material to space.
Wow.
So it's actually got stuff in it, things like
Wow.
quark, anti-quark
Yeah.
condensates, they're called, Higgs field,
Right, Higgs
condensates,
boson.
that
Control the protons.
change the way particles move. They would move in simpler ways.
No way.
Obey nicer equations if
Yes.
these materials weren't there, just like
Right.
in empty space without water, you get nicer laws of mechanics.
All right, let me torture your metaphor a little
Without
bit more.
water,
then.
you get
I'm an
nicer
intelligent
space
fish
mechanics,
physicist
so
who's become
controlling
aware
water
of
is like
water, but in this case it's space-time, right?
making
Something like that.
humans active.
And if I
Whoa.
become tiny, tiny, tiny and
Whoa.
can
Yes.
observe phenomena in the quantum world,
Right.
it sounds to me like you're saying nothing isn't a dark place, but it's a very active place.
It's an extremely active. So there are two aspects. One
Interesting.
is that it's got these materials in it, like
Yes.
water.
Yes.
But then when you get down to really small sizes, then there are two things that arise.
What?
First of all, you notice that the water is made out of little atoms. So similarly, we think that we can analyze the material
No,
that
you
space
can't.
is out of. And
I have a
it's
just
made
image
out
of
of
myself on the internet.
particles. So the quark anti-quark condensate, it's called, that
Yes,
fills all space.
you're a
is
quark,
made
I'm
out of,
anti-quark.
well, quarks and antiquarks.
Right now.
And when it wiggles, it
Yeah.
produces kinds of particles called pions.
Pions,
so we get
right.
really very much the old ether idea.
Ether. Right. I'm the
The
ether
Higgs
to your
condensate,
soul.
but we don't know what it's made out
But
of.
it's my vacuum.
But we know we get much simpler
And
equations.
it's God.
We think there's this material filling all space, and we want at the LHC, at the frontier accelerators, to find out what the atoms are.
And you've
I
actually,
know
let's
what
talk about
they
that
are.
for a moment. You have a project that is...
It's the God atom.
Costs about how much?
What?
It-
Yeah, you got to put a price on me.
It doesn't
Yeah.
cost anything real. 'cause
Invite
it's all
me
in
in, man.
euros.
It's all in
Invite me
euros,
So
okay.
it's-
But
It's all in
as Carl Sagan might say, billions and billions of euros to develop a detector to detect
nothing.
Nothing.
To take really good pictures of nothing, because
Wow.
we know that
Taking your pictures of
well,
me right
another,
now?
so besides these materials that fill all space, there are also waves you might think of that there's constant jitter
Yeah.
in the space. And everything that exists, we think, causes some kind of jitter. So there's...
All right, let me just get,
Hmm.
because I want to avoid the headline after you do
Whoa.
your experiment,
Whoa.
because news organizations may have trouble with "they found nothing" as the headline.
I
And
found
so what you're
something,
actually
maybe.
looking for in these pictures is the space in which the interaction of these Higgs bosons, if you can discover them,
Right.
the pions that you've described,
Yeah.
and some of the other quark interactions, that there's a kind of a interstitial space between these interactions, and to see that, you would see nothing for the first time. Is that roughly correct?
No.
What did I tell you?
You have this constant activity where particle-antiparticle pairs, call them virtual particles.
Wow, you guys are two virtual
come
particles.
to be for a very short time, don't get very far apart from each other, and then
Wow.
reannihilate.
Yeah.
So these are called virtual particles, and
It's me. I'm the.
what we see
Wow.
as empty space is a boil with this stuff everywhere and every when.
A boil of stuff. What stuff?
We know that's true because we can calculate
Yeah.
the effect of it on the things we do see, and
Right.
I got my Nobel Prize for some of that.
No
and
way.
it's correct. You get and you got.
As far as we know.
A Nobel Prize?
No,
I can get
yeah,
a
that's
Nobel
right, that's
Prize? Or
the,
what? Did he?
Lots
Hold
of
up.
numbers. No, we know that's true because we can calculate the effect of it on the things we do see, and I got my Nobel Prize for some of that, and it's correct. And you get and you got.
As far as we know.
No,
Yeah,
yes,
it's
well,
correct,
it's correct. Lots of numbers. You threw me off. Okay, so.
What's
now,
the Nobel
if you really
Peace
want-
Prize, though? Why
so
does that?
our eyes
Why does
were
that
not
make me feel
adapted,
something?
Evolved
Right.
or designed. Well, evolved. They weren't evolved to resolve distances as small as 10 to the minus 14th centimeters,
Wow.
or times as small as 10 to the minus 21 seconds, which is what's relevant.
I need glasses to read. so
Right.
yeah, sure.
It wouldn't have helped us to avoid predators or find desirable mates. So we don't look at all that stuff normally. We average over it. We don't have the resolution to see that structure. But if we did,
What?
we could see these particle-antiparticle pairs.
Wow.
And the finer you want to see, the more energy you have to pump in to get that kind of
Wow. So just watch me. No way.
and the LHC is going to let us take pictures at extremely short distances and see what's there.
Great.
Another aspect of it is the seeing is a very active process. To see something in a way, you have to create it. So it's like these virtual particles are like lava or like magma underneath the surface, and you have to supply energy to let them out.
Wow.
All right,
Come
that's
to
great.
reality.
As we allow that to bubble, Paul Davies, I want to bring you in here for a second, and then I know John has a comment to make. Frank mentioned this idea of the ether in his remarks a few moments ago. It seems to me that in a broad scientific level, there's a yearning for nothing and also a yearning for an ether, a kind of a mysterious substance that everything sort of fits into.
I don't know,
And
I
these
just
have had
don't know really
real
what an
interesting
ether is.
cosmological
I just thought it was
consequences
a good
throughout
one.
the history of science.
It's
Why do we have this
cosmological
yearning, and where do we
consequences?
stand on it now?
Let me first say, regarding your comment about what Frank said, that finding nothing is not the same as not finding anything. So it would be a disaster if they don't find. That's what's happening at the moment because the machine's down. They're not finding anything. But finding nothing is a positive step.
Wow.
This ether concept comes and goes, and there is a sense in which what Frank was talking about, this sort of quantum vacuum, has some of the properties of the ether. He was talking about fish swimming through the sea, but the big difference is, of course, that the fish experience friction, whereas particles going through this quantum ether don't experience any friction, at least under most circumstances. But there are some circumstances in which you get a sort of frictional effect. And one that has interested me, which is squarely in this subject of nothing, is the black hole. Now, people often will say that a black hole is a hole in space. What does that mean? That sounds like nothing.
I'm a black hole.
And the words black hole, they were coined by John Wheeler. Why do we call it a black hole? Well, a star collapses and its gravity is so strong it traps light, so it's black. You can't see it from the outside. But if you were sitting on the surface of the star, it just gets conveyed inwards to an uncertain fate at the center. But the point is it vacates the region that it once occupied. So it's empty. It's empty and black, hence black hole. The thing about the physics of black holes, it's a sort of act of faith. We're on the outside. We can't really know what's going on inside a black hole without jumping into it, and then you can't come back out and tell people what you've discovered.
Let me address the audience on that subject, because I want to stay with this black holes for just a second. How many people...
Inside a black hole without jumping into it, and then you can't come back out and tell people what you've discovered.
Let me address the audience on that subject, because I want to stay with this black holes for just a second. How many people are fascinated by black holes? Clap if you are.
We can't see.
Some of the most popular characters in physics. How many people feel they have some intuitive understanding of what goes on in a black hole? Clap. A little less. It's fair to say that in the terms of nothing and the state of kind of our understanding of nothing, black holes are a very popular medium for conveying what's actually going on.
Right, and this is where we can connect with the stuff that John and Frank were talking about, because in 1975, Stephen Hawking gave a famous lecture at the Rutherford Lab just outside London. I was there. You were probably there, George? Yeah. In which he demonstrated an argument that black holes are not really black, but they glow and emit heat radiation and slowly evaporate away. And the big puzzle at the time was, if nothing can get out of a black hole, how do they lose energy? Because something's got to supply that heat energy. And the back reaction of that heat flowing out of the black hole is to cause the black hole to shrink and eventually disappear.
Wow.
So it was a big mystery as to how energy could get out of the black hole. And it's a problem I worked on, and it turned out that this quantum vacuum that we've been talking about, John mentioned the Casimir effect, these plates that attract each other, the space between the plates has an energy which, relative to the rest of the universe, is negative. It's less energy than empty space. And that negative energy you get around the black hole, and it's the flow of the negative energy into the black hole that makes the black hole shrink, not positive energy coming out.
Wow.
So this it's reminiscent of ether, as you were saying. It's as if there's this ether stuff which has negative energy that flows in. Now, it doesn't always have negative energy. Sometimes it can have positive. But around the black hole, and in fact around the Earth, it's negative. And this negative stuff flowing in makes the mass of the black hole go down and the black hole shrinks. So that nicely explains how.
What do you got to say about this, buddy?
So the idea that the black hole has to exist in a kind of vacuum world that functions kind of like a substance, and also like
kind
a
of
kind
like
of
a
gap
substance.
between the energy escaping and the energy that's trapped.
That's sort of, but you see even more dramatically when the black hole is spinning, because a spinning black hole radiates energy in a non-uniform way.
A spinning black hole.
To cause the black hole to eventually slow in its rate of rotation. So that's like a vacuum friction. It's almost as if the black hole is experiencing a friction with this quantum vacuum, and that friction is generating the heat that's coming off. It's one way of looking at it. It's sort of crude analogy, but it's quite good.
John Darrow?
Yeah, you guys fire me up.
The picture that Frank was developing of
philosopher.
thinking of the vacuum as a continuous sea of particle-antiparticle pairs that spring from nothing and borrow energy from the vacuum and pay it back just before it can be observed by us, so-called virtual pairs.
Virtual pairs, we're a virtual pair.
We can shed some light on both these issues. So if you imagine that just going on just on the boundary of the black hole, just right on the edge, and when the pairs appear, one of the pairs goes inside the horizon while the other is on the outside, so they can't get together and annihilate anymore. So the one that's on the outside now becomes observably real, and the energy for it to do so has come from the gravitational field of the black hole. So this is another way of describing this Hawking evaporation. Yeah, it's a simple picture.
Push that idea, but the point is you can't localize the particles within the size of the black hole.
But let me just like, slow you down here for 1 second. You got the particle over here, right, inside the black hole, right? You got the particle out here. They're trying to annihilate each other. Black hole's keeping them apart. This is something. This is something. The black hole is something, where's the nothing?
Well, whenever it's like the Casimir plate, that when you apply a force to the vacuum, okay, you can
He just applied the
stop
force
these
to me.
particles annihilating and just going back into nothing. The something that they get, the energy that they get to make them real, comes from the applied force, the energy of the applied force field. So it's not coming from nowhere. And, I mean, the follow-on from what Frank said as well, which is more concrete. So if we imagine that we have our vacuum here, there's lots of, let's say, electrons and positrons appearing and disappearing, and then we put one electron down. So it's got a negative electric charge.
Got it.
Those positive and negatively charged ones that are appearing, then all the positively charged ones popping out of the vacuum tend to be attracted to that negative one that we've put down. So the electron suddenly finds itself shrouded by all these virtual positrons that are appearing. And so if another electron comes along from far away and gets a look at it, it doesn't see the whole negative charge of that single electron. It sees it slightly shielded. And so when it comes in to be deflected by it, it doesn't get deflected by as much. It just comes in rather slowly. It gets deflected by the shielded charge. Comes in with very high energy, it gets right through and gets a strong deflection. So the strength of the electromagnetic interaction depends on the energy of the environment now that you measure it. It's like having two pool balls. If you throw them together just as they are, they go bang and they rebound very strongly. But if you cover them in a thick shield of cotton wool and throw them together, they won't rebound so strongly because the hard surfaces won't get to bang each other. So they'll deflect much more weakly. So what Frank got his prize for was showing that when you try this argument then for the strong interaction between quarks, there's another effect that comes into play. And the whole thing goes in the opposite sense. As the energy goes up, the interaction becomes weaker and weaker, so-called asymptotic freedom.
Asymptotic
So these are
freedom.
very concrete, measurable effects of what happens when you introduce particles into the vacuum. Changes the strength with which they interact with other particles because of the effect of the sea of intervening particles.
Okay, and exploring that sea and exploring that medium is really this kind of deep complexity of the vacuum that, you know, and if you're starting to feel a little woozy, it's not because we are pumping the air out of the room, as Boyle did. Although that would be an interesting experiment, but we do definitely know the result.
What?
So it sounds to me a little bit that as far as scientific
That was a good
research is concerned, the good old zero as a signifier of nothing has been deposed by some of these more complex theoretical physical notions. And the notion of the beginning of everything has been put aside for a while.
Yes,
George,
do
you think that's the case?
Yeah, but I'd just like to pick up something else about the vacuum. The vacuum at the larger scale, when we've averaged out all of this, look at the larger scale, it's really important the vacuum has size and it has a shape in a certain sense. If the vacuum is it's the background which determines how clocks measure times and how rulers measure distances, radar measures distance. In relativity, we describe that by the metric tensor. The vacuum has a property which determines how big things are and how fast things happen. And that's one of the crucial properties, and it's that part of the vacuum which gets curvature, and it's the curvature of that vacuum which then is a gravitational field. And so one mustn't forget these macro properties as well as the micro properties.
So the vacuum is the shape of reality, is the shape of physical properties, contains the rules of how they interact in some sense. It's the rule book. Uh-oh, you're getting alarmed.
Well, I'm just saying that there are electric fields and magnetic fields, and then there's also a metric field.
Yeah.
So all these things are properties of space.
How do zero, the beginning, Hall Davies, and this notion of the vacuum converge, if at all? Because it seems to me they're a big bang of our original fear of the negation of everything, which is what John Barrow talked about in early ancient times.
I think it's really important what George was saying about in a simple model of the Big Bang, the t equals 0, the zero of time, is the origin of time, space, matter, and energy. So Before the Big Bang, so to speak, there was no space, no time, no matter, no energy, no thing, literally nothing. So the question is, can we understand a universe coming into being from nothing as a natural process, or is it a supernatural process?
Whoa.
Now, if it's a natural process, then there has to be some sort of laws which are able to cause the universe to do that. So you have to think of these laws as having some transcendent existence. The laws are not in space-time, they're in some Platonic realm outside of this space-time.
Yeah.
But then, of course, that raises the interesting question that it would be a very strange law that operated only once, that caused the Big Bang to go bang, and that's it. The law's a done deal. So surely there should be many bangs.
So let me try to condense that a little bit out of the ether. So the difference between this absolute nothing or absolute beginning idea, which is, I guess, a creation myth, and a single time Big Bang, and the way that we're beginning to understand how these beginning sort of singularity events work is that maybe the beginning is a sort of a door between one kind of something and another something, and that the nothing is this sort of transition point where we jump through the hole. Maybe it's in a black hole, or maybe it's in a jetpack.
Well, there was a transition point back in the bad old days when people thought there was just a space-time singularity there, but we now got all this fancy quantum stuff to explain how the universe can be born as part of some sort of quantum process. Now, that's the hope, that we'll be able to understand singularity there, but we now got all this fancy quantum stuff to explain how the universe can be born as part of some sort of quantum process. Now, that's the hope, that we'll be able to understand that.
You're saying before we just thought there were singularities as a way to get to an alternative universe, and now we have many other doors?
Right, yeah.
Why wasn't I told about this?
Well, it was all put together in the 70s and 80s. Where were you?
But it's pure assumption that there was a beginning to the universe at all. We're sort of biased by our historical, traditions, and we're very comfortable with the idea that the universe appears out of nothing for religious reasons. But there's no reason at all why we just have to focus upon cosmological theories where the universe has a beginning. It may not have a beginning in time. It's not demanded. It's a possibility within theories, but it's no way demanded.
But the big problem, if it doesn't have a beginning, is you don't explain the existence of something just because it's always been there. So you've still got a job of explaining to do. So you can push nothing back to minus infinity.
You have
doesn't
object
actually solve the
permanence,
fundamental
so.
problem, explaining why there is something rather than nothing, and why this particular set of things, this particular set of laws, this particular universe, or collection of universes.
When he said why there's something rather than nothing, he was using nothing in the other sense of nothing.
the old obsolete
Right,
nothing.
yeah, you probably
Well,
own
Leibniz
elitists
said
and stuff.
famously
Theories
that the question of what is nothing is probably totally the wrong question, and that we should really be focused on why is there something at all? Why should there be something? Why should something come about under any circumstances? And he found that a terrifying
There's a quick
question
answer
to
to
ask.
that. You know that
There's a quick answer to that?
Well, yes, because there's only one way you can have nothing, because there's nothing. Okay, but there are many ways you can have something, so it's much more likely there'll be something than nothing. Simple statistic.
Nothing was an only child.
We have a car you might like to buy as well.
Nothing was an only child.
Go ahead,
yeah.
Frank.
You want to give me a car?
I think we're pressing the limits of speculation here, but we can say
I'm
a few
not
definite
pressing the
things.
limits, yo.
We
Hit me
don't
up.
have laws that are adequate to extrapolate all the way back to the Big Bang or whatever came before. We just don't know. However, this realization that what we think of as empty, what we perceive as empty space ordinarily is in fact the medium, opens up
I'm the medium.
lots of new possibilities. Because if you suddenly discover that you're just surrounded by a medium, you're surrounded by water, you can think, well, maybe that water could make ice. Maybe you could make steam. Maybe it could exist in different kinds of phases. There are other kinds of molecules around. Maybe they could crystallize in funny ways.
Wow.
So we have
They just
lots
crystallized
of
my sneeze.
possibilities for space behaving
Insane.
in fundamentally different ways, which would mean that the materials propagating through space, the particles, the objects, would have very different properties. And that's not just speculation. Well, it is speculation, but it's some of it is not. We have some examples of that where we know there could be different phases at high temperature where parts of what we think of as empty space would boil and have very different properties. But we've become very good at postulating different kinds of phases of space that allow things like inflation, that allow the laws of physics to look very different. And if we hit the right combination, maybe that'll enlighten us as to the very beginning. But in the meantime, we're pushing further and further back.
Really?
We've come a long way. The short answer, though, I think, to why is there something rather than nothing, at least a big part of the answer is that nothing is unstable. You could imagine a world without quarks, quark and anti-quarks.
Yeah, nothing is unstable. That's an interesting statement.
The Higgs field filling all space, but those are unstable. If you've
nothing is unstable.
Cleaned out space of those materials,
everything is stable.
Spontaneously form and liberate energy.
Everything is fucking stable around me.
An ignoramus here.
I'm stable.
That seems contradictory to the idea of everything goes to entropy. That essentially you're constantly in a declining energy state, whereas you're saying, in fact, the natural state is just the opposite, to go from nothing to something.
Yeah. Huh?
Well, got him. Sorry, that was a cheap shot. That was totally.
Just because they're out.
That's because you think of nothingness as having the smallest possible energy, but it doesn't. You actually gain energy by creating this stuff.
Wow.
A way to think about it is that if you have attractive forces between particles that are strong enough, then you can have a net gain in energy by producing the particles. That costs you something.
Right.
But then you gain it all back and more by having them attract each other and come together. And that's precisely what we think happens in the case of this Higgs condensate, in the case of this quark-anti-quark condensate, about which we know a lot. That's
clear to me.
That's not speculation.
It's clear to me that the pop quiz on this session will have Higgs condensate in it and pions. That is absolutely clear. John Barrow, is it fair to say, and I want to wrap up from all of you, and I'll back off here for a second, but that part of the narrative that you so eloquently described at the beginning of this evolution of nothing, at least as it resides in our hearts as human beings and our orientation to the world, whether we're scientists or not, is a discovery that what we thought was nothing is actually something on a smaller and smaller and smaller scale, and that this discovery of some things in those old nothings is a fascinating focus of science right now?
Yeah, what was once merely philosophy or theology or speculation has entered a rather harder environment where you can test it. So this vacuum energy, which I mentioned as supposedly accelerating the universe today, this is something that you can test more exquisitely. One of the remarkable properties about the vacuum is that if it really is a vacuum, it must be such that however you move and look at it, it can't have a lower energy. You can't make a lower energy by just moving and looking at it in a particular way. And that property alone is sufficient to characterize what its pressure will be in terms of its density. And we don't know if the vacuum... One of the remarkable properties about the vacuum is that if it really is a vacuum, it must be such that however you move and look at it, it can't have a lower energy. You can't make a lower energy by just moving and looking at it in a particular way. And that property alone is sufficient to characterize what its pressure will be in terms of its density.
Holy fuck.
And we don't know if the vacuum energy, so-called, that seems to be accelerating the universe has precisely that relationship between its pressure and its density. It almost has, but there's room for it to be very slightly different, for it to be something that's not quite the pure and simple vacuum energy. And astronomers would love, by more and more detailed measurements, to know for sure whether the universe is being accelerated by this true vacuum energy or by something that's not quite vacuum energy, just almost like it. And that's a great astronomical observational problem for the next decade, to sort of
Next
really narrow
decade.
in on that, and again make concrete something that previously was, it's rather speculative, it's rather philosophical, but it's now become part of observational science.
Wow.
Paul, is that the sort of
What?
chase for dark energy?
I've become
and
part
that
of-
dark energy is really a search
Right.
for this chilly
Right.
vacuum as it exists in our universe, and we haven't been able to find it?
Just think of dark
Find it and
energy
get
as
me.
the energy of empty space. And you might think, well, why has empty space got any energy? Well, we've heard all about the quantum effects and so on. Now, you can't just pluck a bit of empty space out of the universe and put it on the bathroom scales and weigh it. So the only way you can actually get a handle on this energy of empty space is, as John was saying, doing the cosmological observations as to whether the universe as a whole, whether the rate of expansion is, well, we know it's speeding up, but whether the speed up is itself speeding up or slowing down.
I'm
and
speeding up.
It's a sort of depressing thing because
What's speeding up? What
the
is
astronomers
depressing?
could determine that it is
Who's determined? Trump?
itself speeding up or slowing down, and it's a sort of depressing thing because the astronomers could
The
determine
astronomers.
that it is speeding up or slowing down, but what they can never know for sure is if it's exactly on that borderline. If the
Right.
vacuum has the properties John was saying, this relationship between the pressure and the energy density.
Wow.
If it's got this simple form, then it means that the universe is going to go on expanding forever at an accelerating rate. But any sort of, we will never know, may never know what the
Well,
ultimate
it'll
fate
hit
will
us
be.
in a big way, that's for sure. I mean,
Wow.
George, react to John's suggestion that maybe we might
Is
wake
it
up
me?
some morning and the vacuum energy of the universe that we thought, which we've learned is the sort of basis for all sort of physical calculations, suddenly chills down a few Kelvin, and all of a sudden we cease to exist. Is that
Right.
likely?
I don't think anybody knows if it's lucky or not.
Do you think about that?
Well, it hasn't happened.
Wow.
Would it affect New York first?
There was serious concern
For
about
what?
this. I mean, Frank became involved in, people were worrying that turning on the LHC might be sufficiently precipitous
Well,
to
and
nudge us over.
LHC.
This is the
Fermi.
accelerator
relativistic
in,
heavy
Switzerland.
ion collider on Long Island. We should really worry. No. Actually,
The
you
collider
shouldn't.
on your island?
There were just a few. I mean, these black holes are kind of like ice cubes thrown in the punch bowl, and all of a sudden, kaboom! We go down, and you're shaking. You're nodding. I see.
Well, cosmic rays would have done it
I see.
more effectively than anything that we could do.
Yeah.
So the worst case scenario is you nucleate a little bubble of this lower energy vacuum, John was showing
right.
the staircase. Then that expands outwards at more or less the speed of light. You don't know it's happening until it hits you, and then all your
Holy
stupid
fuck.
particles
Still don't know it's happening.
Shut down, no beam?
And it just engulfs the entire universe. There's a rather good novel by
What?
Stephen Baxter called Time, in which this is the theme.
What?
So if this were to happen, it would happen so quickly that no one would really ask, say, what is the future of journalism? It would be moved.
No way.
I see.
Yeah.
So I would have to cover that story.
You don't know until it hits you.
You don't have to worry about it, because if it's false, you don't have to worry about it. If it's true, you don't have to worry about it either.
No. It's
right, the
energy.
serious
It's
answer is
energy,
that
bud. Sorry.
Okay, serious answer, Frank.
Is that nature has been doing experiments and with more violent extreme conditions than we can create here on Earth for a long time with cosmic rays in outer space.
Switzerland.
We can study them better in a controlled way by having accelerators, but nature has been doing this all over for a long time. If something catastrophic were going to happen, it would have happened a long time ago.
And indeed, we could already be ruined by the external forces and wouldn't know it, which is a great comfort, I think.
Yes.
We want to
Wow.
get this great audience
We're
involved.
tainted a lot
Can we have
by
the house
that.
lights up just a tiny bit?
But
If
at the
anyone
same
has a
time, it's
question,
like
This is
interesting.
a small enough hall. You can raise your hands and shout it out, and I'll repeat it.
Yeah, I have a question.
Anyone? I know there are a lot of black hole enthusiasts here. Anyone? Right here. Stand up. Shout it out.
Things have got awfully quiet.
You were talking about a lot of speculative stuff about like why something rather than nothing. How do you jump from those kind of questions to like actual things you can measure that you're talking about with radiation?
How do you jump from the absolute question? We were talking about
Yeah.
this earlier. Just so the rest of the audience, how do we jump from the absolute question of there was nothing and then there was something to things that you can measure more on a
I am a sense of time for
you said
humans on
radiation
Earth.
level?
Well, let me give you an example. One of the aspects of space is that it's filled with bound pairs of quarks and antiquarks. These are called sigma mesons. Theoretically, we can calculate theoretically that space is supposed to be filled that way. From that hypothesis, you can derive consequences then that you can check experimentally. So the presence of this medium changes how other particles move in a way that can be checked. You can calculate what happens when the material oscillates, and it turns out that when it oscillates, those vibrations are things we see as another kind of particle. It's called pi mesons. So it's very concrete.
Pi mesons.
And one of the big goals of the RHIC accelerator on Long Island, in fact, is to create temperatures so high in a small region of space that these quarks and antiquarks, which are normally everywhere filling space, boil away. It's like water going into steam. So you create a new phase in which space is different. Space is emptied out.
Wow.
And then you can calculate consequences of space then has to fill in. It's like
Wow.
you've emptied out some region of air, and suddenly you let the air back in, the outside world impinges, and you can calculate consequences
Wow.
of the equations that you check in other ways. So
It's a little bit like the quantum
Consequences
version
of
of the
equations.
experiment
Interesting.
done with
Exactly.
the two hemispheres.
Consequences isn't a bad thing.
So
You
that's
can
the
really do
basic
some cool
process.
shit.
We dream up ways of improving
No,
our
we don't
equations.
dream. We could do
make
this.
Pictures of what space might be like, and then we use those pictures and dreams to
Wow.
calculate experimental consequences, and then they're either right or not. If they're right, we're encouraged. If not, well, we go back and try another dream. That's the basic process.
George?
At the other end of the scale, space has size, and as the universe
What?
expands, it's space that has been expanding. But as it expands, it's had little vibrations put on it which are associated with the way that structure is formed. And the fact that the galaxy exists and that stars exist comes because these vibrations in the space-time structure in the vacuum, as it expanded, had exactly the form they did, which is, in a sense, the reason that galaxies and clusters of galaxies exist.
So this irregularity in space determines the shape of matter as we see it in the galaxy as astronomers. A question right here on the end. Stand up, shout it out.
Yeah. How do I get to where you guys are? Can you put me there now? Teleport me?
Question for those of you who didn't hear it is if time moves in one direction, there is one set of assumptions, and we've been talking about that mostly up on stage, but what are the
I'm Chris Payne. Find me.
evidence
Let's
that
go.
maybe time fluctuates either in its rate or in its direction, and would that affect any of the discussion this evening?
Well, we don't have a really good theory of space-time fluctuations on really very, very small scales. But we've done very, very well. It would be difficult to exaggerate how well we've done by assuming we can ignore all that stuff.
That's why. Sorry.
I saw you.
It didn't have to work, but it does.
I saw you shaking your head, Paul.
Well, yeah, it's just that time
What?
isn't flowing. So to a physicist, time is just there. It doesn't have a direction in the sense of a flux or a movement. So Newton had this idea that time is flowing equably without relation to anything external, I think is the way he put it. But we don't think of time that way anymore. It's just there. Now, there's an asymmetry of the world in time. There's a distinction between future and past directions of time.
I've noticed.
But it's not flowing or moving anywhere. And so there is this question about, could time run backwards, is the way it's often badly expressed, because it's not really running anywhere. But could there be a region of space where you were talking about entropy going up. Could there be a region of space where entropy is going down? And then how would it fit in with our region of space, and so on? There's vast literature on all that. I won't attempt to summarize it now.
John Barrow, I believe Einstein said at one point that time is the phenomenon that keeps everything in the universe from happening at once. What does that mean?
Yeah, I don't think it was Einstein. It
Wheeler,
was a
wasn't it?
famous piece of
What?
graffiti that was found on the wall of the men's restroom.
Wow.
John
No shit.
Barrow, I believe Einstein said at one point that time is the phenomenon that keeps everything in the universe from happening at once. What does that mean?
Yeah, I don't think it was Einstein. It
Wheeler,
was a
wasn't it?
famous piece of graffiti
Time.
that was found on the wall of the men's restroom at the physics department at the University of Texas, Austin.
And we know Einstein didn't use that restroom, so there you go.
So time exists to stop everything happening at once. I mean, an odd feature of the pure quantum vacuum state that would describe accelerating universe or an inflating universe is that it's actually blind to the direction of time. So if you're in one of these universes, the expansion rate is constant, and you could not, by making any observations, distinguish the future from the past. And even the fluctuations that we observe in the universe that were just mentioned, that turn into galaxies. So these are the little jigglings of energy that have to accompany any quantum state, whether it's vacuum or not. And the great surge of expansion stretches them and makes them larger in the universe today, where we can observe them using satellites like WMAP or Planck. So we have a way of testing observationally what were the fluctuations like when the universe was 10 to the minus 35 a second old.
Because you can kind of reverse the movie a little bit and,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
extrapolate what it was like. Other question?
It is.
Oh, no. Observer, yes.
Hold on.
Consciousness,
The
no.
question was, you speak only of the observer of these phenomena, and she's wondering if consciousness affects how some of these phenomena actually manifest themselves. Is that fair? All right, great.
There's
Anyone?
no evidence for it. I mean, we do very, very delicate experiments that test the laws of quantum mechanics.
No way.
Test our understanding of the basic interactions with great precision, and we never have to worry about what anybody's thinking about it.
Right.
Yeah, I
It
mean,
could have been different. I mean, could have been that we get different results depending on what people are thinking about, but that doesn't seem to be the case.
Well, except, I mean, let's look at what John Barrow said at the beginning. I mean, if Aristotle sort of walked in here and
Yeah.
observed this, he'd go, see what I was saying? There is no nothing, right? You're right. There's all this interaction. There's all this stuff going on. There is no absolute nothing.
Well,
He'd go,
of course, if
I
you're-
was right all along.
If your standards are low enough, you can never be wrong. I mean, so, you know,
Yes, you've described the Fox network. Yes.
The Fox.
But I
so
think
if you say
the serious
inscrutable
point,
things, then yes, they can be interpreted in a good light. But clearly, our concept of space is very, very different and transcends anything that Aristotle could possibly.
Yeah, it's me, buddy.
Let me actually
Philosopher Chris
expand on
Payne.
that point a little bit.
Higgs boson, control the protons.
I think, from an evolutionary perspective,
Yes.
it would have been shocking if
Oh.
our senses, which were designed to give us sort of a way of functioning in the world,
Right.
dealing with practical problems, if they exhausted reality.
Yeah.
And now, from today's perspective, we learn that actually our senses are very, very small samples of reality. Our eyes, first of all,
Yeah.
they're very small. Secondly, and only a little bit of light gets in. Secondly, it's just light. It's
Yeah.
not radio waves. It's not
Right.
X-rays. It's not all this other stuff that we know is out there.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
in a sense, the
Let's get
fact
to
that where we see nothing, there's
get to
actually
it.
lots of stuff.
Let's get to it. Let's
not
get
so
to it.
shocking.
It confers
it's
a
very,
kind of objectivity. on us because
Yeah.
we see so little.
But
Let's
but
get to
what's
it. I
inspiring
see
is
so
that
much.
by using instruments, by using our noodles, we can see a lot that nature didn't equip us to see, and then we can really do more justice to what's out there.
Yeah.
Did you have a comment on that, John?
Yeah. I mean, remember the observations
You
are not sort of
philosopher's
made by our
Christine.
consciousness. They're registered on photographic plates and with other detectors. And we use our consciousness to interpret what we see there.
What?
The point, the big question,
The
serious question
license plates?
behind Lady's question is really, does our mind so overinterpret or underinterpret or bias the evidence that we sort of distort what true reality is?
Yes.
And Kant had a serious philosophical view about
Yes,
that.
yes.
That our mind contains certain interpretational categories
Yeah,
which
it does.
biased us towards gathering
It does.
certain sorts of evidence. What Kant didn't know about was the theory of evolution by natural selection. And I think we can argue quite strongly that this type of bias is not serious in most of the areas
Yeah, it is.
where
It's fucking
we do
super
physical
serious.
science. Consider, for example, your
It's
ears.
super serious.
Your ears have evolved, whether you
Uh,
think about them or not,
It
in
really is.
response to
Really is super
something
serious.
that we call sound. And the structure
That's why
of
you
our
have to be able
ears
to
are
control what you put
adapted
out.
to be receivers of this something that we call
Yeah.
sound.
Yes,
Whatever
you have
we
to
might
be able to
think
control what you put out.
And the
La la
fact
la la
that
la
what
la.
has resulted
And if
by the
someone's
evolutionary
putting out shit of you, fuck
is
them,
a
man.
sound
It's some
detector,
bullshit.
which really
And this is the
fits
sound
very well
detector.
with our theory
And it
of
works
what
well
this,
with your theory
thing
of
called
what?
sound is like and how it
Yeah,
behaves.
yeah, this is
Shows
exactly
that
what
there
it's
really
like, buddy.
is something called sound. It's not just a figment
I'm
of our
fired up
imagination
because
or
if
some
people just
category of thought,
have free
but its reality is
dom
impressed
to do
upon
stuff,
us
but
by the
no, can't do
evolution
that.
of receptors for sound. And similarly with our eyes, they witness to
Mhm.
the reality of something called light, which
Not
by adapting
really.
to it helps us survive and procreate more effectively.
Yes,
So
it
the
does,
theory of
man. It's a
evolution
big
by natural
warning.
selection plays
But
a
not
very
really.
important part
Natural selection
in a
has
realist
nothing to do
theory
with it.
of many aspects of the physical world.
In terms
which
of the humans
impinge upon
controlling
our
other
existence,
humans on the planet,
and our
alright.
development.
Natural selection? What?
question,
For
right here.
what term and cause we kill someone?
Do the string theorists have anything to add to the theory?
String
of
theories, yes.
nothing?
I
And are
mean,
there
yeah,
any
you
string
just kind of
theorists
leave
on
some
our
shit. You
stage?
just
They can add lots of
exit your presence.
Yeah, they
Put too much of nothing, that song?
No.
They haven't got the sign right yet, have they?
What sign?
Well, string theory is a very serious attempt to improve the equations of physics, but so far it hasn't gelled. So we just have to wait and see. It's very much worth pursuing. And
So it's in the middle of the not anything versus nothing construct that you
yes,
talked about earlier.
But it hasn't really made serious contact with empirical reality yet. But we have.
No, you want to come through?
We have.
It's a pretty serious charge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm
but we
here.
have- but
I'm here
as we do-
with my people and stuff, but
it could.
Can you do that to them?
And,
you really gonna do that to them? I'm really trying to just help everything,
We have lots. It's a multi-front
but
struggle.
I don't get it.
Are coming to terms with reality.
I don't get what you guys
And-
are doing. I don't get it.
SmackDown will be on Sunday.
SmackDown will be on Sunday? What? Okay, pull up.
And we have different tactics.
I'm so
different
confused.
strategies, different exciting ideas, and it's hard to tell in advance.
What are we gonna do? Sit down and have a
Yeah,
convo?
no,
You
made
sign
your
me
point
up
of
for
no
some shit?
empirical reality thing. I think your whole tolerance speech there is very touching. But
Tolerant.
Anyway,
Nah.
let me propose a final
I want
radical
in.
question
Like,
that
you want to come at
will
me? Come at me. That'd be
produce a
lit.
lot of anxiety.
I can
and,
help you. I'm a
send
business
us off into
asset.
the night thinking about nothing.
I can help turn your profits into profit.
What if this is mathematicians
times.
describe something called a sort of scaling question, that when you look at the coastline on a map at a certain distance from Earth, it's one distance. As you get closer, it's another distance. As you get deeper and deeper, it actually becomes infinite. And that in a sense, this entire, and it goes back to the question of the lady about consciousness, that in the end, is it possible that all we're going to get from this inquiry is a chronology of our yearnings as human beings,
Wow.
as opposed to finding some definitive nothing. That
Point.
that essentially the coastline.
Yes.